They said it would be funny, send the grease monkey to a five-star restaurant, watch him squirm in his secondhand jacket, then ghost him. Just a joke. But when Nate Rowan walked into that gleaming dining room, oil still under his fingernails and hope still in his heart, nobody expected what would happen next. A little girl's voice cut through the laughter. "Mommy, I like him." And the woman who turned around wasn't just anyone. She was Elena Caldwell, daughter of the most powerful CEO in the city. What started as cruelty became the beginning of something nobody saw coming. Stay with me until the end of this story and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this journey travels. The fluorescent lights of Martinez Auto Repair flickered as Nate Rowan wiped his hands on an already stained rag, the scent of motor oil and old coffee hanging thick in the air. It was 6:47 p.m. on a Friday, and the garage was finally quiet. The last customer had picked up their sedan an hour ago, and Nate had stayed late, the way he always did, making sure Mrs. Chen's brake pads were properly fitted. She was 73, lived on a fixed income, and Nate had only charged her for parts. "You're too soft, Rowan," his boss, Jimmy Martinez, had told him 100 times. "You'll never get ahead being Santa Claus in coveralls." But Nate didn't see it that way. His mother had raised him alone after his father disappeared when Nate was 7, working 2 jobs and still finding time to volunteer at the church soup kitchen every Sunday. She taught him that kindness wasn't a transaction, it was a way of life. He hung up his coveralls, revealing a faded flannel shirt and jeans that had seen better years. His reflection in the clouded mirror near the employee bathroom showed a man of 32 who looked older, not from hardship, but from the weight of caring. Dark hair perpetually mussed, stubble he never quite managed to shave evenly, and eyes that were too gentle for the world that surrounded him. His phone buzzed, a text from Derek, one of the sales guys from the office building next door, where Nate sometimes did emergency repairs on company vehicles. "Hey man, got something for you. You free tonight?" Nate frowned. Derek wasn't exactly a friend, more like a colleague who occasionally tossed him extra work. They'd never texted outside of car troubles. "Depends." "What's up?" The response came quickly. "Remember how you mentioned you hadn't been on a date in like forever? We set something up for you. Blind date. Nice girl. 8 p.m. at Marcello's. You in?" Nate's stomach tightened. Marcello's. He'd driven past that restaurant 1,000 times. The one with the valet parking. The one where people wore suits that cost more than his monthly rent. The one where he absolutely did not belong. "That place is pretty fancy. I don't know if..." "Come on, man. She's expecting someone. You're a good guy. Just show up. Be yourself." 8 p.m. "I'll text you her name." Nate stared at his phone for a long moment. He hadn't been on a date since Michelle, and that had ended 2 years ago when she'd finally admitted that projects, her word for Nate, weren't what she wanted long term. She'd wanted ambition, upward mobility, weekend trips to wine country. Nate had offered her Tuesday dinners with his mother and Saturday mornings fixing neighbors' cars for free. But maybe Derek was right. Maybe it was time to try again. "Okay. Thanks, man. Her name's Rachel. Blonde. She'll be at the bar." Janet. 2 hours later, Nate stood in his cramped studio apartment, staring at his closet with the kind of desperation usually reserved for hostage negotiations. He owned 3 shirts that weren't work clothes. A button-down his mother had given him for his 30th birthday, white, slightly yellowed at the collar. A polo that had been his father's, forest green, a small hole near the hem, and a black sweater with a stretched neckline. He chose the button-down, paired it with his only khakis that didn't have paint stains, and found his dress shoes, scuffed leather that he tried to buff with a paper towel in sheer optimism. In the bathroom mirror, he looked like exactly what he was, a mechanic trying very hard to look like he belonged somewhere he didn't. "You can do this," he whispered to his reflection. "Just be yourself." His mother's voice echoed in his head, something she'd told him when he was 16 and terrified before his first school dance. "Nathan, any woman worth your time will see your heart before she sees anything else." He grabbed his jacket, a gray blazer from a thrift store, only slightly too big in the shoulders, and headed out. That's it. Marcello's rose from the corner of 5th and Lexington like a cathedral to wealth. Warm light spilled from floor-to-ceiling windows, and even from the street. Nate could see crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, and patrons who moved with the easy confidence of people who'd never had to choose between fixing their car and paying the electric bill. The valet eyed Nate's 15-year-old Honda Civic with barely concealed disdain. "Are you dining here tonight, sir?" The word sir carried the weight of a question mark. "Yeah," Nate said, handing over his keys. Yes, I'm meeting someone." The valet's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes did. A flicker of amusement that made Nate's neck flush. Inside, the restaurant was even more intimidating. The hostess stand was mahogany, the floors were marble, and every person Nate passed looked like they'd stepped out of a magazine. Women in cocktail dresses, men in tailored suits, the soft murmur of conversation punctuated by the delicate clink of wine glasses. "Good evening?" The hostess smiled, but it was the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Do you have a reservation?" "I'm meeting someone." "At the bar?" Nate's voice came out smaller than he intended. "Of course, right this way." She led him through the dining room, and Nate felt every eye track him. The blazer that had seemed acceptable in his apartment now felt like a costume, and he was acutely aware of the oil stain on his cuff that he'd missed, a dark smudge against the white fabric. The bar was even worse, a gleaming expanse of black marble with leather stools and a bartender who looked like he'd been hired for his jawline. Two women sat at the far end, both blonde, both beautiful, both very clearly not waiting for someone like Nate. He took a seat, ordered a beer, the cheapest one on the menu, which still cost $12, and waited. 8 o'clock came and went. 8:15. 8:30. At 8:42, his phone buzzed. "Derek. How's it going? She show up?" Nate's fingers hovered over the keyboard. Something felt wrong. The way the bartender kept glancing at him. The way the two blonde women had whispered to each other and then burst into laughter. Still waiting, he typed back. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. "Dude, I'm sorry. The guys, they were messing with you. There's no Rachel. It was supposed to be a joke." The words hit Nate like a physical blow. He read them again, then a third time, waiting for them to rearrange themselves into something less cruel, a joke. His hands trembled as he set the phone face down on the bar. He stared at his beer, half finished, $12 he couldn't really afford, and felt something crack inside his chest, not dramatically, not loud enough for anyone else to hear, but sharp and deep nonetheless. The bartender approached. "Can I get you anything else?" Nate looked up, and maybe the bartender saw something in his face, something raw and real, because his expression softened just slightly. "No," Nate said quietly. "I think I'm good." "You sure? Kitchen's still open if you want to order something." Nate glanced around the restaurant, at the couples laughing over pasta, at the business dinner happening in the corner, at the life happening all around him that he'd never quite been invited into. Pride, stupid, pointless pride, made him nod. "Yeah, dinner for one, I guess." "Well." The hostess led him to a small table near the window, clearly the spot reserved for solo diners and people they hoped would eat quickly and leave. Nate sat down, accepted the menu with hands that still shook slightly, and tried very hard not to let the burning behind his eyes turn into anything more. The menu was in Italian. No prices. He ordered the first thing he could pronounce, something with chicken, and sat back, watching the city move past the window. People coming home from work, couples walking hand in hand, a kid on a skateboard dodging a taxi. Normal people. People who belonged. "Excuse me?" Nate looked up. A little girl stood next to his table, maybe 5 years old, with dark curls and enormous brown eyes. She wore a purple dress with a sparkly unicorn on it, and she was staring at him with the unsettling intensity only children can manage. Hi," Nate said. "Are you sad?" The question was so direct, so completely unfiltered, that Nate couldn't help but smile, just a little. "Maybe a little bit," he admitted. "Why?" "Well," Nate glanced around for this child's parents, but saw no one approaching. "Sometimes grown-ups have bad days." The girl considered this with the seriousness of a judge. Then she nodded. "My mommy has bad days too, but then I hug her and she feels better." Before Nate could respond, a woman appeared, rushing over with the kind of controlled panic unique to parents who've lost track of their child in public. "Maya, I told you to stay at the... Oh my God, I'm so sorry." Nate looked up at her and forgot how to breathe. She was beautiful, but not in the polished, untouchable way of the other women in the restaurant. She was beautiful in the way of someone who'd forgotten to worry about it. Dark hair pulled back in a loose bun, minimal makeup, wearing a simple black dress that suggested elegance without trying. But it was her eyes that caught him. Exhausted, yes, but also kind. The eyes of someone who understood what it meant to have bad days. "It's okay," Nate managed. "She's fine." "Maya, you can't just walk up to strangers." "But Mommy, I like him." The woman, Elena, though Nate didn't know her name yet, froze. Her daughter's words hung in the air between them, and something passed across her face. Embarrassment, yes, but also something else. Curiosity, maybe. "I'm so sorry," she said again. But she was looking at Nate now, really looking, and he had the strange sensation of being seen, actually seen, for the first time in a very long time. "Don't be," Nate said. "She's got good taste. I'm a very likable person." It was a joke, delivered with a self-deprecating smile, and Elena laughed, a short surprise sound that lit up her entire face. "Mommy, can we sit with him, please?" Maya grabbed her mother's hand. "He looks lonely." "Maya, we can't just..." "Actually," Nate heard himself say, surprising himself, "I wouldn't mind the company, if that's okay. My dinner date stood me up, so..." He gestured at the empty chair across from him. Elena hesitated. He could see her weighing it, propriety versus her daughter's enthusiasm versus something else he couldn't quite name. "Are you sure? We don't want to intrude." "I'm sure." She made a decision. "Okay, just for a little while." Elena signaled to someone, a woman in a business suit who'd been watching from a nearby table with the alert posture of a bodyguard. The woman nodded, spoke quietly into her phone, and repositioned herself at a discreet distance. Nate noticed, but didn't comment. Rich people, he figured, brought security to dinner. It was just one more reminder of the gulf between his world and wherever Elena had come from. Maya climbed into the chair across from him, bouncing with excitement, while Elena took the seat next to her daughter. "I'm Maya," the little girl announced. "I'm 5 3/4. What's your name?" "Nate. I'm 32 and no quarters." Maya giggled. "That's old." "Maya," Elena's face flushed. "We don't say that." "It's okay," Nate said, grinning. "She's right, I am old, basically ancient." "Do you have kids?" Maya asked. "Nope, just me." "Do you have a dog?" "No dog either." "A cat?" "No cat." Maya's face fell. "That's sad. Everyone should have a cat." "I'll put it on my list," Nate promised. Elena watched this exchange with something like wonder. "I'm Elena," she said, extending her hand. "And I really am sorry about this. My daughter has decided you're her new best friend." Her hand was warm in his, her grip firm. "Nate Rowan, and honestly, this is the best thing that's happened to me all day." Something in his voice must have conveyed the truth of that statement because Elena's expression shifted, sympathy and understanding crossing her features. "Bad day? You could say that." The waiter appeared, doing a double take when he saw Elena, but recovering quickly. "Mrs. Caldwell, we didn't know you were dining with us tonight. Shall I..." "We're fine here, Thomas. Thank you." "Of course. And for the young miss?" Maya ordered mac and cheese with the confidence of royalty, and Elena ordered a salad, and they settled into an unexpected dinner party of 3. Chuck. The conversation flowed easier than Nate would have expected. Maya dominated much of it, telling elaborate stories about her kindergarten class, her best friend Sophie, and a complex drama involving who got to be the line leader. But between Maya's chatter, Nate and Elena talked too. "So what do you do?" Elena asked. "I'm a mechanic. Fix cars, mostly. Some motorcycles." "Do you like it?" It was such a simple question, but no one had asked Nate that in years. Everyone assumed the answer, one way or another. "Yeah," he said, and realized it was true. "I like fixing things, making them work again. There's something satisfying about taking something broken and making it whole. Elena looked at him for a long moment. That's a nice way to look at it. What about you? What do you do? Something shuddered in her expression. I help run my father's company. Operations, mostly. Sounds important. It's complicated. There was a story there. Nate could tell, but before he could ask, Maya interrupted with an urgent question about whether dinosaurs could swim, and the moment passed. The food arrived. Nate's chicken was probably delicious, but he barely tasted it. He was too caught up in the strange, unexpected warmth of this moment. This woman and her daughter who'd appeared out of nowhere and turned his worst night into something else entirely. Then it happened. At the table behind them, a man started coughing, not the polite clearing your throat kind of cough, but the desperate choking kind. His wife stood up, panic in her voice. He's choking! Someone help! He's choking! The restaurant erupted into chaos. Waiters rushing over, patrons standing, someone shouting to call 911. Nate didn't think. He moved. Years of community volunteer training with the fire department kicked in. He reached the man, mid-50s, face turning red, in 3 strides. Sir, I'm going to help you. Can you breathe at all? The man shook his head, eyes wide with terror. Nate got behind him, positioned his hands, and performed the Heimlich maneuver. Once, twice, 3 times. A piece of steak flew out, landing on the white tablecloth, and the man sucked in a huge, gasping breath. The restaurant went silent for a heartbeat, then erupted into applause. Nate barely heard it. He was focused on the man, making sure he was okay, that his breathing was steady. You're all right, Nate said quietly. Just breathe, nice and easy. Thank you, the man gasped. Thank you, I thought, you're okay now, but you should probably get checked out. Sometimes there can be complications. Paramedics arrived 10 minutes later. Someone had called them, and Nate stepped back, suddenly aware that every eye in the restaurant was on him. He returned to the table where Elena and Maya waited. Maya's eyes were huge. You're a hero. No, Nate said, sliding back into his seat. Just did what anyone would do. Not anyone, Elena said softly. She was looking at him the way she had before, but different now, deeper. Most people would have frozen. Nate shrugged, uncomfortable with the attention. I volunteer with the local fire department sometimes. Community safety training. They teach us this stuff. You volunteer? Elena's voice carried a note of surprise. With the fire department? And the community center on weekends. Help teach basic car maintenance to single parents, people who can't afford shop rates. Nothing fancy. Elena was quiet for a moment, and Nate had the distinct impression he was being evaluated, though for what, he couldn't say. That's remarkable, she finally said. It's just time. I've got plenty of it. Time is the most valuable thing we have, Elena said. Giving it freely is remarkable. Their eyes met across the table, and Nate felt something shift, a connection he couldn't name but could definitely feel. Maya, sensing the moment, chimed in, Mommy, can Nate come to the park with us tomorrow? Maya, please, he can push me on the swings. Sweetie, Nate probably has plans. I don't, actually, Nate said, then immediately wondered if he'd been too eager. I mean, if it's okay. I don't want to intrude. Elena looked torn. He could see the war playing out on her face. Caution versus curiosity, practicality versus something else. Richmond Park, she finally said. 2:00, by the big playground. I'll be there. The check came, or rather, didn't come. The manager appeared instead, insisting that the mule was on the house, that they were honored to have such a hero dining with them. Nate tried to protest, but the manager wouldn't hear it. Outside, the valet brought up 3 cars, Nate's beat-up Civic, and 2 black SUVs with tinted windows. That's us, Elena said, gesturing to the SUVs. The woman in the business suit had reappeared along with another security guard. Nate's stomach dropped. Those weren't just rich people cars, those were serious money cars. Elena, he said slowly, who exactly are you? She smiled, but it was sad around the edges. My full name is Elena Caldwell. My father is Victor Caldwell. He owns Caldwell Motors. Nate's voice came out flat. the biggest automotive manufacturer in the state. Yes. They stood there in the valet circle, the reality of their situation settling around them like snow. I should have told you, Elena said. It was nice to have a conversation where that wasn't the first thing someone knew about me. I fix cars for minimum wage, Nate said. I live in a studio apartment. I eat ramen for dinner 3 nights a week. I know. You can't. He stopped, trying to find the words. We're not. I know that too. Elena's voice was quiet but firm. But Maya likes you, and She paused. I had a nice time tonight. For the first time in months, I felt like I was talking to someone real. Someone who wasn't trying to get something from me or impress my father or position themselves for something. Tomorrow might not be a good idea. Maybe not. Elena opened the SUV door, helped Maya inside. Before she climbed in after her daughter, she turned back to Nate. But maybe it is. 2 o'clock, Richmond Park. If you show up, you show up. If you don't, she shrugged. Then this was a really nice dinner. The SUVs pulled away, and Nate stood alone in the valet circle with his battered Civic and a head full of confusion. He drove home in a daze, parked in his building's cramped lot, and climbed the 3 flights to his apartment. Inside, he sat on the edge of his bed and pulled out his phone. There were 7 texts from Derek. Apologies mostly, mixed with attempts at justification. It was just supposed to be funny, man. You know how the guys are. Nate deleted them all without responding. Then he called his mother. Nathan? Her voice was warm, concerned. It's late, honey. Everything okay? Ma, I need advice. Always. What happened? He told her everything, the cruel joke, the dinner alone, Maya and Elena appearing like something out of a story, the man choking, the revelation about who Elena really was. His mother listened without interrupting, the way she always did. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Ma, you like her, she said simply. This Elena. I just met her. That's not what I asked. Nate closed his eyes. Yeah, I like her. And her daughter. But, Ma, she's a Caldwell. She's got security guards and drivers, and she probably lives in a mansion. I'm me. You're my son, his mother said firmly. You're the man who volunteers at the fire department, who fixes Mrs. Chen's car for free, who teaches single mothers how to change their own oil so they don't get ripped off. You're the man who saved someone's life tonight without thinking twice. That's who you are, Nathan. She's out of my league. That's not for you to decide. That's for her to decide. His mother's voice softened. Baby, you've been hurt before. I know that. But you can't let fear make your choices for you. If this woman and her little girl make you smile the way I'm hearing in your voice right now, then show up tomorrow. See what happens. The worst thing that can happen is nothing, and you're already used to that. It was gentle, but it hit home. I'm scared, Nate admitted. Good. That means it matters. Now get some sleep. You've got a park date tomorrow. Nate didn't sleep much. He lay awake, staring at his ceiling, replaying the evening over and over. Maya's laugh, Elena's smile, the way she'd looked at him when he'd saved that man, not like he was a hero, but like she was seeing something in him she'd been looking for. At 6 a.m., he gave up on sleep and went for a run. At 8, he cleaned his apartment, not that it was dirty, but he needed something to do with his hands. At 10, he showered and stood in front of his closet again. What did you wear to a park date with a woman whose family probably owned the park? He settled on jeans and a clean t-shirt, his least battered sneakers. Casual. Honest. Him. At 1:30, he got in his car. At 1:55, he pulled into Richmond Park's parking lot. The playground was at the center of the park, visible from the lot. Nate could see it, swings and slides and one of those elaborate jungle gym structures. And next to it, sitting on a bench, was Elena. She was alone except for the security guard hovering nearby, dressed in jeans and a light sweater, her hair down around her shoulders. She looked like any other mother waiting for her child to arrive, except Nate knew she wasn't. He sat in his car for a full minute, hands on the steering wheel, heart pounding. You can't let fear make your choices for you. He got out of the car. Elena saw him immediately. Her face lit up, actually lit up, and she stood, waving. Nate walked over, hands in his pockets, trying to look more confident than he felt. You came, Elena said. I said I would. People say a lot of things. Before Nate could respond, a car door slammed and Maya came running from the parking lot, a woman in casual clothes, probably a nanny, following behind. Nate! Maya launched herself at him, and Nate caught her, lifting her up without thinking. Hey kiddo, ready to play? Yes, Mommy, can Nate push me on the swings? If he doesn't mind, I don't mind. And just like that, they were a unit, Nate, Elena, and Maya, walking toward the playground together. The security guard followed at a distance, and the nanny settled on a bench with a book. And for the next hour, Nate forgot about everything except the pure, uncomplicated joy of pushing a 5-year-old on a swing. Higher! Maya shrieked, laughing. Higher! Elena stood nearby, watching, and Nate was hyper-aware of her presence. The way she smiled when Maya laughed, the way she relaxed in increments, like someone remembering how to breathe. You're good with her, Elena said when Maya ran off to the slides. She's easy to be good with. Not everyone thinks so. Most of my father's colleagues' kids drive their nannies crazy. Maya's not like that. No, Elena agreed. She's not. She paused. Father wasn't like that either. There it was, the first mention of Maya's father. Nate waited, sensing this was important. He died, Elena said quietly. 2 years ago. Car accident. I'm sorry. David was good, really good, kind, like you. He and my father never got along. David worked in nonprofit development, didn't care about business or profits or any of the things my father valued. But he loved me, and he loved Maya, and that was enough. Nate heard the past tense, the weight of grief still present but tempered by time. After he died, my father tried to reorganize my life, moved us into his house, hired staff, put security on us. He said it was for Maya's protection, but really I think he was just trying to control something after losing David. And I let him because I was drowning and didn't know how to do it alone. But you're not drowning now. Elena looked at him. No, I'm not. But I'm also not living. I'm just existing, going through motions, attending board meetings and charity galas and doing everything my father expects while feeling like I'm disappearing a little more every day. What do you want? Nate asked. It was a simple question, but from the way Elena's eyes widened, no one had asked her that in a long time. I want... She stopped, looked at Maya on the slides. I want to feel real again. I want Maya to grow up around real people, not just staffers and business associates. I want mornings that aren't scheduled and evenings that don't require designer dresses. I want... She laughed, but it was hollow. I don't even know anymore. I've forgotten how to want things for myself. They sat on the bench together, watching Maya play, and Nate felt the weight of her words settle around them. For what it's worth, he said, you seem pretty real to me. That's because you don't know me. You don't know the person I've become in my father's world. Maybe, or maybe I'm seeing the person you still are underneath all that. Elena turned to look at him, and there was something vulnerable in her expression, something raw and hopeful and scared all at once. Why are you here, Nate? Really? You could have stayed home, avoided all this complication. Honestly? Nate met her gaze. Because last night was the first time in a long time that I felt like I mattered. Not because of what I could do for someone or fix for someone, but just because of who I was. And I wanted to feel that again. That's what you gave me too, Elena whispered. They sat there, the truth hanging between them, until Maya came running back, demanding that Nate watch her go down the slide backwards. And Nate did, because that's who he was. A man who showed up, who paid attention, who made a 5-year-old feel like the center of the universe for an afternoon. But as he watched Elena watch her daughter, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were all standing on the edge of something that could either be wonderful or could shatter them all. He just didn't know which yet. The afternoon sun filtered through the oak trees as Maya convinced Nate to join her on the monkey bars. And Elena found herself laughing, really laughing, for the first time in months. Watching this man in his worn jeans and faded t-shirt hang from the bars while her daughter counted his attempts was absurdly charming in a way she couldn't quite explain. 17, 18, 19, Maya shouted. You did it! Nate dropped to the ground, shaking out his arms. I think I pulled something. Getting old, remember? You said you'd do 20. Maya, give Nate a break, Elena called out, still smiling. It's okay, Nate said, already reaching for the bars again. A promise is a promise. He made it to 20, barely, and Maya rewarded him with a hug so enthusiastic it nearly knocked him over. Elena watched the way Nate's face softened, the way he didn't stiffen or pull away, but simply accepted the affection with the ease of someone who understood that children gave love without conditions or complications. David had been like that too. The thought came unbidden, and with it, a wave of something Elena couldn't quite name. Not guilt, exactly. Not betrayal, but something close to both. Ice cream? Maya asked, bouncing on her toes. Can we get ice cream? Please, please, please? Elena checked her watch. It was nearly 4, and she'd told her father she'd be back by 5 for dinner with his business partners. Another obligation, another performance. I don't think we have time, sweetie. Maya's face fell in that dramatic way only 5-year-olds could manage, and Nate caught Elena's eye. What if I walked with you guys? He offered. There's a place 2 blocks from here, Angelo's, best soft serve in the city. We could grab some and I could walk you back to your car after. It was such a simple suggestion, but Elena felt the weight of the decision. Saying yes meant extending this afternoon, meant letting Nate further into their lives, meant acknowledging that this wasn't just a chance encounter anymore, but something she was choosing. Please, Mommy? Maya grabbed her hand. Nate can tell us more stories about fixing cars. He said sometimes people drive with their emergency brake on for weeks. Elena looked at Nate, who shrugged with a small smile that said the choice was entirely hers, that he'd understand either way. Okay, she said. Ice cream. But then we really do have to go. Maya cheered, and they started walking, the security guard maintaining his discreet distance behind them. The nanny had already left, her shift over, and it was just the 3 of them moving through the park like any other family on a Saturday afternoon. Except they weren't a family. They were a widow, her daughter, and a mechanic who'd stumbled into their lives through a cruel joke that had somehow become the opposite of cruelty. So you really had someone drive with their emergency brake on? Elena asked as they walked. For 3 weeks, Nate confirmed. Came in complaining about a burning smell and terrible gas mileage. I took one look, and there it was, brake engaged the whole time. Did you charge them extra for being ridiculous? Charged them for the brake pad replacement they needed, and gave them a 5-minute lesson on dashboard warning lights. Sometimes people just don't know. Doesn't make them stupid. There it was again, that fundamental kindness that seemed woven into everything Nate did. Elena had spent the last 2 years surrounded by people who saw advantage in every interaction, who calculated the cost-benefit of every conversation. Nate simply helped people because they needed help. Angelo's was a small shop with a striped awning and a line of customers that spoke to its quality. They waited their turn, and Elena watched Nate interact with Maya, answering her endless questions about why ice cream melts, whether penguins eat ice cream, and what his favorite flavor was. Chocolate, he said. Classic. Reliable. You? Rainbow, Maya announced. With sprinkles. Of course with sprinkles. What kind of monster eats rainbow without sprinkles? Maya giggled, and Elena felt something crack open in her chest. Not painfully, but like a window opening after being sealed shut for too long. When they reached the counter, Nate tried to pay, but Elena was faster, handing over her card before he could protest. You don't have to. You pushed my daughter on swings for an hour and hung from monkey bars until your arms nearly fell off, Elena said. I think I can buy you ice cream. They sat on a bench outside the shop, Maya between them, all 3 working on their cones in the late afternoon sun. A young couple walked past, the woman visibly pregnant, and Elena saw Nate smile at them, that same easy, genuine warmth he seemed to extend to everyone. Do you want kids? Elena asked, then immediately wanted to take it back. Too personal. Too soon. But Nate didn't seem bothered. Yeah, someday. If it works out that way. I always thought I'd have a whole bunch of them, you know? Loud house, chaos, someone always needing something. My mom raised me alone, and I remember thinking it seemed lonely for her. I wanted different than that. Why hasn't it happened? Nate licked melting ice cream off his thumb. Same reason anything doesn't happen. Wrong timing, wrong person, wrong circumstances. My ex-girlfriend, Michelle, she wanted someone ambitious, someone climbing ladders, making moves. I'm a mechanic who volunteers at a community center. Not exactly the trajectory she had in mind. She was an idiot, Elena said, then blushed. Sorry. That was accurate? Nate grinned. It's okay. We wanted different things. Better to figure that out before than after. That's very mature of you. I've had 2 years to get mature about it. Maya finished her cone and immediately discovered she had ice cream on her hands, her face, and somehow her elbow. Elena pulled out wet wipes. She always had wet wipes, and began the cleanup process while Nate finished his own cone. You're good at that, he observed. At what? The mom thing. You make it look easy. Elena laughed, but it was hollow. It's not easy. Nothing about this is easy. I have a nanny, a housekeeper, my father's staff helping with everything, and I still feel like I'm drowning most days. But you do it anyway. Because what's the alternative? Give up? Let Maya grow up thinking her mother couldn't handle life without her father? Elena heard the bitterness in her own voice and tried to soften it. Sorry, that came out harsher than I meant. Don't apologize for being honest. They sat in silence for a moment, watching people pass by. A group of teenagers laughing too loud. An elderly man walking a tiny dog. The rhythm of a city on a Saturday afternoon. Can I ask you something? Nate said. Sure. Why did you sit with me last night? Really? Maya said she liked me, but you could have just smiled and moved on. You didn't have to stay. Elena considered the question, really considered it. Because you looked like I felt, she finally said. Alone in a room full of people, like you didn't quite fit anywhere. And I thought maybe, I don't know, maybe we could not fit together for a little while. Nate turned to look at her, and the intensity in his eyes made Elena's breath catch. I'm glad you stayed, he said quietly. Me too. Maya, oblivious to the moment happening above her head, jumped up. Can we see Nate again tomorrow? Maya, please? We could go to the zoo. Nate, do you like zoos? I love zoos, Nate said, but he was looking at Elena, making it clear the decision was hers. Elena's phone buzzed, a text from her father. Where are you? Dinner's at 5:30. The Matsudas are already here, sir. Reality crashed back in like a wave. The Matsudas, potential investors in Caldwell Motors' new electric line. Important people. People her father expected her to charm and impress while he talked business. I have to go, Elena said, standing abruptly. I'm sorry. I have this thing, dinner with my father's associates. It's okay. Nate stood too. I'll walk you to your car. They made their way back through the park, Maya chattering about the zoo and all the animals she wanted to show Nate, while Elena's mind raced ahead to the evening awaiting her. She'd have to change clothes, fix her hair, put on the smile she wore like armor at these things. The SUVs were waiting in the parking lot, the security guard already holding the door open. Elena helped Maya inside, then turned back to Nate. Thank you, she said, for today, for being real. Thank you for taking a chance on someone you just met. Elena hesitated, then pulled out her phone. Can I have your number? In case Maya wants to plan that zoo trip. In case Maya wants to? Nate's lips quirked. In case I want to, Elena corrected, and watched his face light up. They exchanged numbers, and Elena was about to climb into the SUV when she did something that surprised even herself. She reached out and hugged him. Just briefly, just enough to feel the solid warmth of him, the way he smelled like soap and sunshine. Tomorrow, she whispered, the zoo, if you're free. I'm free, Nate said, and reluctantly Elena let him go. She climbed into the SUV, and through the tinted window, she watched Nate walk back to his old Civic, hands in his pockets, looking like the best thing that had happened to her in years. Mommy, you like him, Maya said. It wasn't a question. Elena smiled. Yeah, baby, I think I do. The SUV pulled out of the parking lot, and Elena spent the drive home preparing herself for the evening ahead. The performance, the small talk, the careful dance of corporate politics. But underneath it all, something warm and fragile had taken root, something that felt dangerously like hope. The Caldwell mansion rose from its hilltop perch, like something out of a different era, all stone and glass and old money. Elena had grown up here, but it had never felt like home. Not really. It was a showcase, a monument to her father's success, and she'd always felt like just another piece of expensive furniture. Maya ran ahead to her room, which was actually a suite larger than most apartments, while Elena headed to her own quarters to change. Her father's voice echoed from the dining room, already entertaining the Matsudas with stories about the automotive industry. Elena showered quickly, twisted her hair into an elegant knot, and pulled on a silk dress that cost more than Nate probably made in a month. The thought made her pause, looking at herself in the mirror. Who was this woman? Not the one who'd spent the afternoon eating ice cream and watching monkey bar demonstrations. This was Elena Caldwell, daughter of Victor Caldwell, polished and perfect and utterly hollow. She applied makeup with practiced efficiency, added pearl earrings, and checked her reflection one final time. The transformation was complete. The woman in the mirror looked like she belonged at a corporate dinner party. The woman in the mirror looked nothing like herself. "Elena!" Her father's voice boomed up the stairs. "They're waiting!" She took a breath, put on her smile, and went downstairs. The Matsudas were lovely people. Mr. Matsuda kind and soft-spoken, his wife elegant and warm. They asked about Maya, complimented the house, and discussed their company's innovations in battery technology with genuine enthusiasm. Under different circumstances, Elena would have enjoyed the evening, but she couldn't stop thinking about Nate, about the way he'd looked at her in the park, like she was interesting rather than ornamental, about how easy it had been to talk to him, to simply exist without performance or pretense. "Elena, Mr. Matsuda was asking about your work with the community outreach program," her father said, pulling her back to the conversation. "Oh yes, we've been partnering with several schools to provide automotive training for at-risk youth." The words came automatically. She'd given this pitch 100 times. "That's wonderful," Mrs. Matsuda said. "Do you work directly with the students?" Elena opened her mouth to give her standard response, something about overseeing the program from an administrative level, but stopped. When was the last time she'd actually visited one of the programs? When was the last time she'd done anything hands-on, anything real? "Not as much as I should," she heard herself admit. "I've been disconnected from the actual work lately." Her father's expression tightened, but Mr. Matsuda nodded thoughtfully. "It's easy to lose sight of the mission when you're caught up in management. My wife reminds me of this constantly." Mrs. Matsuda smiled. "Someone has to keep him grounded." The dinner continued, and Elena played her part, but her mind kept drifting. She thought about Nate teaching single mothers car maintenance, volunteering his limited free time to help people who couldn't afford his help. She thought about how he'd described finding satisfaction in fixing broken things. When was the last time she'd fixed anything? When was the last time she'd done something that mattered beyond a quarterly report? The Matsudas left around 9, with promises to continue discussions next week. Elena's father closed the door behind them and turned to her with an expression she knew well, the one that meant a lecture was coming. "What was that about?" he asked. "What was what about?" "Not as much as I should?" "Elena, we're trying to impress potential investors, not make them think you're incompetent." "I'm not incompetent, Dad. I was being honest." "Honesty doesn't close deals." Her father moved to the bar, poured himself a scotch. "You've been distracted lately. Where were you this afternoon? You were supposed to be back by 5. "I was at the park with Maya." "Until 4:30? Elena felt a flare of irritation. "She's 5 years old, Dad. She wanted to play. I let her play." "With security?" "Of course with security." Her father studied her over his glass. "There's something you're not telling me." Elena thought about lying, about keeping Nate's secret for just a little longer, but she was tired of hiding, tired of performing, tired of being less than honest about the one thing that had made her feel alive in months. I met someone, she said. The silence was immediate and heavy. Met someone, her father repeated slowly. What does that mean? It means I met someone. A man. At dinner last night. We spent the afternoon together. What kind of man? What's his background? He's a mechanic. Her father's expression didn't change, but Elena saw the muscle in his jaw tighten. A mechanic? Yes. And you brought this mechanic around my granddaughter? His name is Nate, and yes, Maya really likes him. I'm sure she does. I'm sure he's very charming. Her father set down his glass with careful precision. Elena, I know you've been lonely. I know these past 2 years have been difficult, but you can't just... You have responsibilities, standards. The Caldwell name means something. The Caldwell name, Elena repeated, and something inside her snapped. Is that really what matters to you? Not whether I'm happy, not whether Maya's happy, but the name? Don't be naive. The name is what gives you the life you have. The security, the opportunities, the isolation, Elena interrupted, the constant surveillance, the feeling that I'm just another asset to be managed. That's not fair. Isn't it? Elena moved closer to her father, years of suppressed frustration bubbling up. When was the last time you asked me what I wanted? Not what the company needs, not what's best for the family legacy, but what I actually want for myself. I ask you all the time. No, you tell me all the time. There's a difference. Elena's voice shook. You tell me which events to attend, which people to impress, how to dress and speak and present myself. You've been telling me what to do since David died, and I let you because I was broken and scared and didn't know how to be a widow and a mother at the same time. Her father's face had gone pale. I was trying to help. I know you were, Dad, but I don't need help anymore. I need space. I need room to figure out who I am when I'm not performing for investors or smiling at galas or being Victor Caldwell's perfect daughter. And you think some mechanic is going to help you figure that out? I think he already has, Elena said quietly. In one afternoon, he made me remember what it feels like to just be myself. No pressure, no expectations, just real. Her father was quiet for a long moment, staring into his scotch like it held answers. David was like that, he finally said. Real. I never understood what you saw in him. He had no ambition, no drive. He had kindness. He had integrity. He saw me, Dad. Not the Caldwell name, not the company legacy, just me. And look where that got him. The words hung in the air like poison, and Elena felt tears burn behind her eyes. That's not fair. Life isn't fair, Elena. It's cruel and random, and you can't control it. What you can control is who you let into your life, into Maya's life. You can't just trust anyone because they're nice to you in a park. I'm not just trusting anyone, I'm getting to know someone. Someone who makes me feel like myself again. Her father finished his scotch in one swallow. I want to meet him. What? This Nate. If he's going to be around my granddaughter, I want to meet him. Tomorrow. Bring him here for lunch. Elena's stomach dropped. The thought of Nate in this house, facing her father's interrogation, seemed like a disaster waiting to happen. Dad, I don't think... That's my condition, Elena. Either I meet him in a controlled environment where I can properly assess whether he's suitable for my family, or you stop seeing him. Your choice. It wasn't a choice at all, and they both knew it. But Elena wasn't the broken widow who'd moved back into her father's house 2 years ago. Something had shifted in her, something that had been sleeping and was now waking up. Fine, she said. Tomorrow, 1 o'clock. But Dad, if you try to intimidate him or buy him off or do any of your usual tactics, I will never forgive you. She left before he could respond, climbing the stairs to check on Maya. Her daughter was already asleep, still in her clothes from the park, one arm thrown over her stuffed elephant. Elena changed her gently into pajamas, kissed her forehead, and sat on the edge of the bed for a long moment. I'm trying to be brave, she whispered to her sleeping child. Like your dad was. Like Nate is. I'm trying. In her own room, Elena pulled out her phone and stared at Nate's number. She should call him, should warn him about what her father was like, should give him an out before things got complicated. But it was late, and she was exhausted, and maybe part of her wanted to see how Nate handled her father. David had never backed down from Victor Caldwell's intimidation tactics. He'd simply been himself, kind, honest, steady, and eventually her father had grudgingly accepted him. Could Nate do the same? Elena typed out a text. Change of plans for tomorrow. My father wants to meet you before the zoo. Lunch at my place, 1 p.m. I understand if that's too much too fast. No pressure. She hit send before she could overthink it, then sat waiting in the dark for a response that might not come. Her phone buzzed 3 minutes later. Address? I'll be there. Elena sent the address, then added, Fair warning, my father is protective and intimidating and wealthy in the kind of way that makes people uncomfortable. I fix cars for a living. Everything makes me uncomfortable. See you tomorrow. Elena smiled despite her anxiety and typed back a simple, Thank you. She lay in bed for a long time after that, staring at the ceiling, wondering what tomorrow would bring. Her father would try to buy Nate off or scare him away. She knew that with absolute certainty. The question was whether Nate would stand his ground or decide that getting involved with the Caldwell family was more trouble than it was worth. She couldn't blame him either way. Most people ran when they got close enough to see what her life really looked like. But something told her Nate wasn't most people. Across the city, in his studio apartment, Nate was having a similar crisis. He'd looked up the Caldwell mansion address, had seen it on the GPS perched on the hill like a castle. He'd looked up Victor Caldwell, too. Seen his net worth, his business empire, his reputation for ruthlessness in the boardroom. And tomorrow, Nate was going to walk into that man's house and have lunch. He called his mother again. Nathan, it's midnight. I know, Ma. I'm sorry. Elena's father wants to meet me tomorrow. His mother was suddenly very awake. Victor Caldwell, the Victor Caldwell. Yeah. Oh, baby. Yeah. What are you going to do? Nate laughed, but it was shaky. Show up, I guess. Be myself. Hope that's enough. Yourself is always enough, his mother said firmly. But Nathan, you need to be prepared. Men like Victor Caldwell don't accept people like us easily. They think money equals worth, and they protect their families fiercely. Elena thinks he's going to try to buy me off. He probably will. The question is what you'll do when he does. Nate was quiet for a long moment. I like her, Ma. I really like her. And Maya. They make me feel like I matter. Then you show up tomorrow and you stand your ground. You be the man I raised, honest, kind, and unshakable. You show Victor Caldwell that his daughter chose someone worth choosing. And if he doesn't accept that, then you decide if Elena's worth fighting for. After they hung up, Nate tried to sleep but couldn't. He kept imagining tomorrow walking into that mansion, facing a man who probably saw him as a threat or a gold digger or just someone so far beneath his daughter it was laughable. But he also imagined Maya's laugh, Elena's smile, the way she'd looked at him in the park like he was someone special. That was worth fighting for. He'd show up tomorrow and be exactly who he was, a mechanic who volunteered at community centers, who saved people choking in restaurants, who made a 5-year-old believe in the goodness of strangers. If that wasn't enough for Victor Caldwell, then it wasn't enough. But Nate had a feeling it would be enough for Elena. And right now, that was all that mattered. Sunday morning arrived with the kind of cruel sunshine that seemed to mock Nate's nervousness. He'd been awake since 5, had already gone for a run, showered twice, and was now standing in front of his closet having what could only be described as a breakdown over clothing. The button-down from Friday night hung there, freshly washed, still bearing the memory of humiliation and unexpected joy. His other options weren't much better, a polo that seemed too casual for meeting a billionaire CEO, and a sweater that made him look like someone's youth pastor. He chose the button-down, paired it with his best khakis, and spent 20 minutes trying to get his hair to cooperate before giving up and accepting that he'd always look slightly rumpled no matter what he did. At 11:30, he got in his Civic and started the drive to the Caldwell mansion. The GPS led him up increasingly expensive streets, past houses that grew larger and more imposing with each block, until finally directing him through iron gates that probably cost more than his car. The driveway alone was longer than his street. Manicured lawns stretched in every direction, and the mansion, rose at the end of the drive like something out of a movie. Stone and glass and intimidation. Nate parked his battered Civic next to what he was pretty sure was a Bentley and sat for a moment, hands gripping the steering wheel. "You can do this," he whispered to himself. "You saved a man's life on Friday. You can survive lunch with a CEO." The logic didn't help his racing heart, but he got out of the car anyway. The front door opened before he could knock, and a woman in a crisp uniform, an actual uniform, like butlers wore in old movies, greeted him with a professional smile. "Mr. Rowan? Mrs. Caldwell is expecting you. Please come in." Nate stepped into a foyer that could have fit his entire apartment twice over. Marble floors, a chandelier that probably required its own insurance policy, and a sweeping staircase that belonged in a palace. "If you'll follow me." She led him through hallways lined with art that Nate suspected was original and worth more than he'd make in a lifetime, past rooms he only glimpsed. A library, a sitting room, something that might have been a ballroom, until they reached a set of glass doors opening onto a terrace. And there, at a table set for 4, sat Victor Caldwell. He was exactly what Nate had expected. Mid-60s, silver hair perfectly styled, wearing casual clothes that probably cost a month of Nate's salary, and radiating the kind of power that comes from decades of making decisions that shaped industries. He stood as Nate approached, and his handshake was firm enough to send a message without being overtly aggressive. "Mr. Rowan, thank you for coming. Thank you for the invitation, sir." Victor gestured to a chair. "Please, sit. Elena and Maya will join us shortly. Can I offer you something to drink?" "Water's fine, thank you." A staff member appeared immediately with sparkling water in a crystal glass, and Nate felt absurdly out of place, like a child playing dress-up in adult spaces. Victor sat across from him, and for a long moment simply studied Nate with the kind of assessment that probably made corporate executives squirm in boardrooms. "My daughter tells me you're a mechanic." "Yes, sir, at Martinez Auto Repair downtown." "How long have you been doing that?" "About 8 years, started as an apprentice right out of high school, worked my way up." "No college?" There it was, the first test, delivered with polite curiosity that didn't quite hide the judgment underneath. "No, sir, my mother couldn't afford it, and I didn't want to take on debt. Figured I'd learn a trade instead." "Practical," Victor said, though his tone suggested he didn't necessarily see that as a compliment. "And you volunteer?" Elena mentioned. "With the fire department?" "Community safety training, yes, sir. And I help run a car maintenance workshop at the community center on weekends, teaching basic skills to people who can't afford shop rates." "That's very charitable of you." Nate heard what Victor wasn't saying. The charity was for people with money to spare, not for mechanics who should be focused on their own advancement. "It's not charity," Nate said carefully. "It's community. People helping people." Victor's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Interest or irritation, Nate couldn't tell which. "Tell me, Mr. Rowan, what exactly are your intentions with my daughter?" The bluntness of the question would have been shocking if Nate hadn't been expecting it. He'd known this was coming the moment Elena had texted him last night. "Honestly, sir, I don't know yet. I just met her 2 days ago. But I like her. I like spending time with her and Maya, and I'd like to keep doing that if she wants the same thing." "My daughter is vulnerable right now," Victor said, leaning forward slightly. "She's still grieving her husband, still finding her footing as a single mother. She doesn't need complications or someone who's going to waste her time. With respect, sir, I think your daughter can decide what she needs." The temperature on the terrace seemed to drop 10 degrees. Victor's eyes hardened, and Nate knew he'd crossed some invisible line, but he didn't back down. This was who he was. Someone who believed people should make their own choices, even when those choices made powerful men uncomfortable. "You're right," Victor said finally, surprising Nate. "She can. But I'm her father, and I want to make sure whoever spends time with my granddaughter isn't going to hurt them." "I would never—" Everyone says that. Every man who's ever approached Elena has promised they have good intentions. But intentions don't mean much when reality sets in, when you realize exactly how different your worlds are. Before Nate could respond, Maya's voice rang out across the terrace. "Nate!" She came running from the house, wearing a yellow dress with butterflies on it, and launched herself at him with the fearless enthusiasm of someone too young to understand class differences or social boundaries. Nate caught her, lifting her up, and saw Elena following behind, beautiful in a simple blue sundress, her expression caught between hope and apprehension. "You came," Maya said. "Mommy said you might not come." "I always keep my promises," Nate said, setting her down but keeping hold of her hand. "Mr. Rowan was just telling me about his work," Victor said, his tone lighter now that Maya was present. "Fixing cars, teaching workshops. Very admirable." Elena's eyes met Nate's across the terrace, and he saw the question there. "Are you okay?" He nodded slightly, and she seemed to relax a fraction. "Shall we eat?" Victor suggested. "I'm sure everyone's hungry." Lunch was an elaborate affair. Grilled salmon, roasted vegetables, salads with ingredients Nate couldn't identify. It was delicious and intimidating in equal measure. And Nate was hyper-aware of using the right fork, of not talking with his mouth full, of all the small social graces his mother had taught him, but which felt inadequate in this setting. Maya dominated much of the conversation, telling her grandfather about the park, about Nate hanging from the monkey bars, about the ice cream with sprinkles. Victor listened with the patient indulgence of someone who clearly adored his granddaughter, and for brief moments, Nate could see past the CEO facade to the grandfather underneath. "And Nate saved a man's life," Maya announced proudly. At the restaurant, the man was choking, and Nate did the Heimlich. "The Heimlich maneuver," Elena corrected gently. "Did he now?" Victor looked at Nate with renewed interest. "Elena mentioned something about that. Where did you learn emergency response?" "Community volunteer training through the fire department. They teach basic first aid, CPR, emergency response. I've been doing it for about 5 years now." "Why?" It was a simple question, but Nate sensed it carried weight. "Because I can," Nate said. "I have time and ability, and my neighborhood doesn't have the resources some other places do. Someone needs to know this stuff, and I figured it might as well be me." Victor was quiet for a moment, cutting his salmon with precise movements. "My company has a community outreach program, automotive training for at-risk youth. Are you familiar with it?" "I've heard of it, yes, sir." "It's mostly administrative at this point. Numbers on paper, grants, and funding. But the actual hands-on work, the teaching and mentoring, that's fallen by the wayside." Victor looked directly at Nate. "What would you do differently?" Nate blinked, surprised by the question. "Sir? If you were running the program, what would you change?" Elena was staring at her father with an expression Nate couldn't read, but he answered honestly. "I'd get out of the office. Programs like that only work if the people running them actually know the community they're serving. You can't teach automotive skills from a boardroom. You need to be in the garages working alongside the kids, showing them that this is a real path, not just a charity case." "And you think you could do that?" "I know I could. I do it every weekend at the community center. It's not complicated. You just have to show up and give a damn." The crude language slipped out before Nate could stop it, and he winced, expecting Victor to react. But the older man's expression had shifted into something that might have been respect. "Passion," Victor said. "That's what's been missing from the program. Passion and authenticity." "Dad," Elena said carefully, "what are you thinking?" "I'm thinking," Victor said slowly, "that perhaps I've been approaching this all wrong, looking for credentials instead of character, resumes instead of real experience." He turned back to Nate. "Mr. Rowan, I'll be direct with you. When Elena told me she'd met a mechanic, my first instinct was to protect her from what I assumed was either a gold digger or someone too far beneath her station to be suitable. I made assumptions based on class and circumstance." "Dad," Victor held up a hand. "Let me finish. I was wrong to make those assumptions without meeting you first. I can see that you're genuine, that you care about my daughter and granddaughter, and I can see that you have skills and experience that could genuinely benefit our community programs." Nate didn't know where this was going, but his stomach tightened with anticipation. "However," Victor continued, "I'm also a realist. The world Elena lives in is complicated. There are social expectations, security concerns, media attention. Dating a Caldwell comes with pressures most people can't handle. I'm not most people. Perhaps not. But I need to know you understand what you'd be signing up for." Victor's expression was serious now, all business. "If you continue seeing my daughter, there will be photographers, gossip columnists, people making assumptions about your motives. Can you handle that? Nate thought about it, really thought about it. He imagined his face in tabloids, people at the shop asking questions, his mother dealing with reporters. It sounded awful. But then he looked at Elena, at the way she was watching him with held breath and fragile hope, and at Maya, who was building a tower out of sugar packets, completely oblivious to the adult tension around her. I can handle anything, Nate said quietly, as long as the person I'm handling it for is worth it, and your daughter is worth it. Elena's eyes filled with tears, and she reached across the table to take Nate's hand. The gesture was simple, but in that moment, in front of her father, it felt like a declaration. Victor saw it too. His expression flickered, surprise, concern, and something that might have been resignation. Very well, he said. Then I have a proposal for you, Mr. Rowan. Sir? I'd like to offer you a position, Director of Community Engagement for Caldwell Motors Outreach Program. You'd be responsible for revitalizing our automotive training initiatives, building relationships with community centers and schools, developing curriculum. Real, hands-on work. Nate's mind went blank. What? It would come with a salary commensurate with the position, of course. Office space, resources, a team, everything you'd need to actually make a difference instead of just teaching weekend workshops. It was a dream offer, the kind of opportunity Nate had never even let himself imagine. But something about the timing, about the way Victor was watching him, set off alarm bells. That's incredibly generous, Nate said slowly. But I have to ask, is this offer genuine, or is this a test? Victor's eyebrows rose. A test? To see if I'm after Elena for money. To see if I'll take your offer and disappear, or if I'll refuse on principle and prove I'm not interested in your family's wealth. Nate met Victor's eyes directly. Because either way, it feels like a trap. The silence that followed was deafening. Elena's hand tightened on Nate's, and Maya had stopped playing with her sugar packets, sensing the shift in atmosphere even if she didn't understand it. Then Victor laughed, a genuine, surprised sound. You're smarter than I gave you credit for, he said. Yes, Mr. Rowan, it's a test, but not the one you think. I'm not trying to buy you off or scare you away. I'm trying to see if you're someone who can be part of this family, someone who can hold their ground under pressure, who can see manipulation and call it out, who won't be pushed around by money or power. And? Nate's voice was steady despite his racing heart. And you passed. Victor sat back in his chair. The offer is genuine, by the way. Whether you date my daughter or not, Caldwell Motors could use someone with your passion and community connections. But I need to know you won't take the job just to get close to Elena, and I need to know you won't refuse it just to prove you're not after our money. That's a hell of a position to put someone in, Nate said. Welcome to my world, Mr. Rowan. Nothing is simple when you're a Caldwell. Elena stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the stone terrace. Can I speak to you privately, Dad? It wasn't a request. Victor stood, and they walked to the far end of the terrace, their voices too low for Nate to hear, but their body language clear enough. Elena was angry, gesturing sharply, while Victor maintained his calm CEO demeanor. Maya climbed into Nate's lap. Are they fighting about you? Maybe a little bit. Grandpa fights with everybody, Maya said matter-of-factly. But Mommy always wins. Nate wasn't so sure about that, but he appreciated Maya's confidence. The conversation between Elena and Victor lasted several minutes, their voices rising and falling, until finally Elena walked back to the table with Victor following. Nate, Elena said, her voice tight, you don't have to accept my father's offer. You don't have to prove anything to him or to me. If you want to keep working at Martinez's shop and seeing me on weekends, that's enough. More than enough. But, Victor interrupted, if you do accept, I want to be clear about something. This isn't charity and it's not a test. It's a genuine opportunity for someone who clearly has the passion and skills we've been lacking. Whether you date my daughter or not, the offer stands. Nate looked between them, Elena fierce and protective, Victor calculated but sincere, and Maya completely oblivious, still building her sugar packet tower in his lap. Can I think about it? Nate asked. The job offer, I mean. It's a big decision, and I don't want to make it impulsively. Of course, Victor said. Take your time. The program isn't going anywhere. But, Nate continued, I don't need to think about Elena, about whether I want to keep seeing her. That answer's yes, regardless of jobs or money or complications. Elena smiled, really smiled, the kind that lit up her entire face, and Nate felt like maybe, just maybe, this was all going to work out. Well then, Victor said, standing, I believe there was mention of a zoo? Maya perked up immediately. Yes, the zoo. Can we go now? If your mother says it's okay. Elena looked at Nate, and he saw the question there. Can you handle more of this today? Meeting my father was enough pressure for one afternoon, but Nate had come this far. What was a few more hours? Let's go see some animals, he said. They took one of the SUVs. Victor declined to join them, claiming work to catch up on, though Nate suspected he was giving them space. The security guard drove, the same one from yesterday, and they made their way through Sunday afternoon traffic to the city zoo. Walking through the gates felt like entering a different world. The pressure of the mansion, of Victor's tests and job offers, seemed to fall away as Maya grabbed both their hands and pulled them toward the penguin exhibit. They're my favorite, she announced. They walk funny. And they did walk funny, waddling around their habitat with serious expressions. And Nate found himself laughing as Maya tried to imitate them, stumbling around while Elena took photos on her phone. This is nice, Elena said quietly as Maya pressed her face against the glass, watching penguins dive into the water. Yeah? Yeah. Normal. No expectations or performances. Just this. Nate understood what she meant. The zoo was full of families, parents chasing toddlers, teenagers on dates, elderly couples walking slowly hand in hand. Nobody was paying attention to Elena Caldwell or her security detail or the mechanic she'd brought along. They were just another family enjoying a Sunday afternoon. Except they weren't a family. Not really. They were two people who'd met 3 days ago and a 5-year-old who'd decided they belonged together. But standing there, watching Maya point excitedly at a penguin that had just stolen a fish from another penguin, Nate could almost believe they could be. They moved through the zoo slowly, stopping at every exhibit that caught Maya's interest. The lions were sleeping, boring, according to Maya, but the monkeys were performing a whole drama that had her captivated for 20 minutes. The elephants were massive and gentle, and when one trumpeted, Maya grabbed Nate's hand in surprise and didn't let go. Can we get snacks? Maya asked as they passed a concession stand. What do you say? Elena prompted. Please, may we get snacks? They bought overpriced popcorn and lemonade and found a bench near the giraffe enclosure. Maya sat between them, munching popcorn and providing running commentary on which giraffe was the prettiest. I need to ask you something, Elena said during a moment when Maya was distracted by a particularly tall giraffe. Okay. Are you really okay with all of this? The security guards, my father's interrogation, the fact that dating me means your life gets complicated? Nate considered the question seriously. Honestly? No, I'm not okay with it. The security thing is weird. Your father is intimidating, and the idea of photographers following me around sounds like a nightmare. Elena's face fell. But, Nate continued, I'm not okay with a lot of things about my life. I'm not okay with living paycheck to paycheck, or not being able to afford to take my mom on vacation, or knowing I'll probably never own a house. Life's complicated for everyone, just in different ways. That's not exactly reassuring. What I'm saying is, everyone's got challenges. Yours are just more visible than most people's. But that doesn't make them insurmountable, and it doesn't make you less worth the effort. Elena was quiet for a long moment, watching her daughter chase a pigeon that had landed near their bench. David used to say something similar, that loving me meant loving all the complications that came with me. He was right. He was also fearless in a way I'm not sure I am anymore. He never cared what my father thought, never worried about what people would say. He just existed confidently and completely himself. You're more like that than you think, Nate said. You sat with a stranger in a restaurant. You brought him to meet your father. You're here right now instead of at some corporate event wearing designer clothes and a fake smile. This feels safer somehow. Easier. Good things usually are once you let yourself have them. Maya returned, having successfully chased the pigeon away, and demanded they visit the reptile house next. They spent another hour wandering through exhibits, and by the time they left, the sun was starting to set, and Maya was yawning between sentences. In the SUV on the way back, Maya fell asleep with her head on Nate's shoulder, and Elena took his hand in the dimming light. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For showing up today. For standing up to my father. For being here right now. For all of it. I wanted to be here. I know, that's what makes it mean something." They drove through the city in comfortable silence, and Nate felt something settle in his chest. Not quite peace, but something close to it. A sense that maybe he'd found something worth fighting for, worth navigating complications for. The SUV pulled up to his building, modest and aging compared to the mansion they'd left, and Elena looked out the window with curiosity rather than judgment. "This is you?" "Third floor, corner unit. It's not much, but it's mine. Can I see it sometime?" The question surprised him. "Really? Really, I want to see where you live, how you spend your time when you're not rescuing choking victims or getting interrogated by my father." "It's a studio apartment with secondhand furniture and a fridge full of leftovers. There's literally nothing impressive about it." "That's exactly why I want to see it," Elena said. "Everything in my life is impressive and curated and designed to impress. I want to see something real." Nate glanced at Maya, still asleep in the back seat. "What about her?" "She's out cold. Give me 10 minutes. I just want to see it." They woke Maya gently and carried her, still half asleep, up the 3 flights of stairs. The security guard followed at a discreet distance, and Nate unlocked his door, feeling suddenly self-conscious about every stain on the carpet, every scratch on the secondhand coffee table. But Elena didn't seem to notice or care. She looked around his small space, the pull-out couch that served as his bed, the tiny kitchen with dishes drying in the rack, the shelf of books about car engines and community organizing, the photos of his mother scattered throughout, and smiled. "It's perfect," she said. "It's a dump. It's honest." Elena set Maya down on the couch, where the little girl immediately curled up and went back to sleep. "Everything here tells a story about who you are. That volunteer certificate on the wall, those work boots by the door, that photo of you and your mom at what looks like a church picnic. Christmas potluck, actually, 3 years ago." Elena picked up the photo, studied it. "You look happy." "I was. I am, mostly. It's not perfect, but it's mine." "That's what I want," Elena said softly, setting the photo back down. "Not perfection, just something that feels mine, not curated by my father or expected by society or designed for appearances." Nate moved closer to her, close enough to smell her perfume, something light and expensive that somehow didn't seem out of place in his shabby apartment. "You can have that," he said. "You just have to choose it." "I'm trying to." Elena looked up at him, and there was vulnerability in her eyes that made Nate's chest tight. "I'm choosing right now, standing here with you." They stood there in his small living space, close but not touching, while Maya slept on the couch and the city hummed outside the windows. The moment felt fragile, like something that could shatter if they moved too quickly or spoke too loudly. "I should go," Elena finally said, though she didn't move. "It's getting late, and Maya needs her bed." "Okay, but I'll call you tomorrow, after I deal with whatever fallout is coming from today." "Fallout?" "My father rarely accepts being challenged. There will be consequences, questions, probably another interrogation about my choices." Elena smiled, but it was tired. "It's how he shows love, by trying to control everything. And you'll handle it." "I'll handle it." Elena gently woke Maya, who protested sleepily but allowed herself to be guided toward the door. At the threshold, Elena turned back. "Nate? About the job offer. Whatever you decide, make sure it's what you want, not what you think will make my father accept you or what will bring you closer to me. Choose for yourself." "I will." She left, taking her security guard and sleeping daughter with her, and Nate's apartment felt suddenly very empty and very quiet. He stood in the silence for a long moment, processing everything that had happened: the lunch, the test, the job offer, the zoo. Elena in his space looking at him like he was someone worth choosing. His phone buzzed, his mother, with her impeccable timing. How did it go? Nate laughed and collapsed onto his couch. Ma, I have no idea. It was possibly the most intense day of my life. And I once had to rebuild an engine in 4 hours because a customer needed their car for a wedding. Tell me everything. And he did. The whole story, from Victor's initial interrogation to the job offer to Maya falling asleep on his shoulder. His mother listened without interrupting, and when he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Nathan, do you love her? The question caught him off guard. Ma, it's been 3 days. That's not what I asked. Nate closed his eyes, thought about Elena's smile, the way she'd looked at his apartment like it was something precious, the trust in her eyes when she'd asked if he was really okay with all the complications. I could, he admitted. I could love her, easily. Then everything else is just details, his mother said simply. You figure out the job, the father, the security guards, all of it. But if you love her, or could love her, then you fight for it. It's not that simple. It never is, baby, but the best things never are. After they hung up, Nate lay on his couch in the dark, staring at the ceiling and trying to imagine what came next. Tomorrow he'd have to decide about the job offer, navigate whatever new complications arose, figure out how to date someone whose world was so far removed from his own. But tonight, he just let himself feel the warmth of possibility, the hope that maybe something good was finally happening in his life. Across the city, Elena carried a sleeping Maya into the mansion and up to bed. Her father was waiting in the hallway, and she braced herself for whatever lecture was coming. But Victor just looked at her, really looked at her, and said quietly, You're happy. It wasn't a question. I am, Elena admitted. He's good with her. With Maya. Yes. Victor nodded slowly. David would have liked him, I think. It was the highest compliment her father could give, and Elena felt tears prick her eyes. Yeah, Dad, I think he would have. But Elena, I know, it's complicated, it's fast, it's possibly a disaster waiting to happen, but I'm doing this, with or without your approval. Victor smiled, and it was sad around the edges. You already have it. I just hope you both know what you're getting into. We don't, Elena said honestly. But I think that's okay. Not everything needs to be planned and controlled. She kissed her father's cheek and went to her room, where she lay in bed thinking about Nate's apartment, about the way he'd stood his ground against her father, about the feeling of his hand in hers at the zoo. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But tonight, she let herself hope. And somewhere in the middle of the city, that hope existed in 2 places at once, in a mansion on a hill and in a studio apartment with secondhand furniture. Different worlds, same feeling. Maybe that was enough. Monday morning arrived with the weight of decision-making. Nate had barely slept, his mind cycling through Victor's job offer from every possible angle. At 6 a.m., he gave up on rest and headed to the garage early, finding comfort in the familiar smell of motor oil and the mechanical predictability of engines. Jimmy was already there, coffee in hand, reviewing the day's schedule. He looked up when Nate entered, eyebrows rising. You look like hell, Rowan. Rough weekend? You could say that. Nate grabbed his coveralls from the hook. Got offered a job yesterday. Yeah, doing what? Director of Community Engagement for Caldwell Motors, running their outreach programs, automotive training for at-risk youth, real salary, benefits, the whole thing. Jimmy whistled low. Caldwell Motors? That's major league, man. How'd you even get on their radar? Nate hesitated, then decided honesty was simpler than trying to construct a believable lie. I'm seeing Victor Caldwell's daughter. Sort of, it's complicated. Jimmy nearly spit out his coffee. You're what? Since when? How? Since Friday night. And it's a long story involving a cruel prank, a blind date that wasn't real, and a 5-year-old who decided I was worth keeping around. This is the best thing I've heard all month, Jimmy said, leaning against the workbench with undisguised glee. Nate Rowan, dating a billionaire's daughter. Does she know you eat ramen for dinner 3 nights a week? She's been to my apartment, so yeah, probably figured that out. Jimmy's expression shifted from amusement to something more serious. So what's the problem? Take the job, date the girl, live the dream. The problem is, I don't know if he's offering me the job because I'm qualified or because he wants to control his daughter's life. And I don't know if taking it means I'm selling out or if refusing it means I'm being stubborn and stupid. That's a hell of a position to be in. Yeah. They worked in silence for a few minutes, Nate focusing on an oil change that required exactly 0 mental energy, letting his hands do familiar work while his brain continued its endless loop of pros and cons. "Can I give you some unsolicited advice?" Jimmy finally said. "Do I have a choice?" "Not really. Look, I've known you for 8 years. You're the guy who stays late to make sure Mrs. Chen's breaks are perfect, who teaches free workshops on your day off, who volunteers with the fire department because you think it matters. You do all that on a mechanic's salary with 0 recognition. Your point? My point is, imagine what you could do with actual resources. With a real budget, a team, connections to schools and community centers. You're already doing the work. This would just let you do it bigger and better. But what if it's a trap? What if Victor Caldwell is manipulating you? What if it doesn't work out with his daughter and everything gets awkward?" Jimmy shook his head. "Nate, you can what if yourself out of every opportunity that comes your way. Or you can take a chance and see what happens. When did you get so wise?" "I've always been wise. You just never listen." Nate's phone buzzed in his pocket. A text from Elena. "Morning, can you talk?" He stepped outside into the alley behind the shop, the morning sun already warming the asphalt, and called her. She answered on the first ring. "Hi." "Hi yourself, everything okay?" "Define okay." Elena's voice carried a thread of tension. "My father spent breakfast listing all the reasons why I should be careful with you. My assistant just informed me that there's already gossip circulating about us among the board members. And I have 3 meetings today where I know people are going to ask intrusive questions. I'm sorry." "Don't be. I expected it. This is what happens when you're a Caldwell. Your private life becomes public property." She paused. "Have you thought about the job offer?" "I've thought about nothing else since yesterday." "And?" Nate leaned against the brick wall, watching a stray cat pick its way through the alley. "I want to say yes. The work itself is exactly what I've been doing anyway, just with actual support and resources. But I'm terrified of what it means. Whether I'm selling out, whether people will think I'm using you to climb some ladder, whether your father will use it to control things between us. Those are valid concerns. But maybe they're also excuses." Elena's voice was gentle but firm. "Nate, I've watched you with Maya, seen how you talk about your volunteer work, heard the passion in your voice when you describe teaching someone to change their own oil. This job would let you do that on a scale that actually matters. Don't turn it down because you're afraid of what people will think. Even if what they think is that I'm with you for your money, let them think whatever they want. I know the truth. You know the truth. That's what matters." Nate closed his eyes, feeling the morning sun on his face, and made his decision. "Okay, I'll do it, but on one condition." "What's that?" "Your father and I need to have a conversation, a real one, not a test or an interrogation. I need to know that if things don't work out between you and me, I still have this job. I need the separation to be clear." "That's fair. I'll set it up." "And Elena? Thank you for believing I can do this. Thank you for being someone worth believing in." They talked for a few more minutes about nothing important. Maya's upcoming school week, the weather, plans for dinner later that week, and when they hung up, Nate felt lighter somehow. The decision was made. Now he just had to follow through. He went back inside the garage where Jimmy was pretending not to have been listening through the door. So I'm taking the job." Jimmy grinned. "Good. You would have been insufferable if you'd turned it down out of some misguided sense of pride. When do you start?" "I have no idea. I still need to have an actual conversation with Victor Caldwell about expectations and boundaries. Look at you negotiating with billionaires. Last week you were arguing with Mrs. Henderson about whether her check engine light was serious. It was serious. She needed a new oxygen sensor. My point exactly. You're too good for this place anyway." Nate looked around the garage. At at the oil-stained floors, the ancient tools, the calendar from 2019 that no one had bothered to replace. It wasn't glamorous, but it had been home for 8 years. "I'm giving you 2 weeks' notice," he said. "Enough time to find someone else. Train them on your system." "You don't have to?" "Yes, I do. You gave me a chance when I was 18 and barely knew which end of a wrench to use. The least I can do is leave you in a good position." Jimmy's expression softened. "You're a good kid, Rowan, even if you are dating way out of your league." The rest of the day passed in a blur of routine maintenance and growing anticipation. Elena texted around noon to say she'd arranged a meeting with her father for that evening. Neutral ground, a restaurant downtown, just the three of them to discuss the position formally. At 6 o'clock, Nate found himself walking into Carmine's, an upscale Italian place that was significantly nicer than Marcello's, but less pretentious. Victor and Elena were already there, seated at a corner table that offered privacy without feeling hidden. Victor stood to shake Nate's hand, and there was something different in his demeanor. Less CEO, more human. "Mr. Rowan, thank you for coming." "Thank you for meeting with me, sir." They sat, and a waiter appeared immediately with menus and water. Nate ordered the first thing he saw, chicken parmesan, while Victor and Elena ordered with the ease of people who'd eaten at places like this hundreds of times. "My daughter tells me you want to discuss the position," Victor said once the waiter had left. "I appreciate that. Shows you're thinking seriously about it." "I am, sir. It's a significant opportunity, and I want to make sure we're clear on expectations before I accept." "Go ahead. Ask whatever you need to ask." Nate took a breath, chose his words carefully. "First, is this offer contingent on my relationship with Elena? If things don't work out between us, do I still have the job?" Victor didn't hesitate. "Yes. The position is yours based on your qualifications and passion for the work. My daughter's personal life is separate from business decisions." Second question, how much autonomy would I actually have? I don't want to be a figurehead while someone else makes the real decisions. If I'm going to do this, I need to actually do it, not just be a name on a program brochure. Fair question. Victor leaned back in his chair. The previous director had minimal autonomy because he had no vision and less passion. You, from what I've seen, have both. I'd expect regular reports, quarterly reviews, and approval for major expenditures. But day-to-day operations, curriculum development, community partnerships, that would be your domain. And the salary? $75,000 to start, with performance reviews every 6 months. Health benefits, retirement matching, standard corporate package. Nate tried not to react, but $75,000 was more than double what he made at the garage. It was the kind of money that meant his mother wouldn't have to work 2 jobs anymore. That meant he could actually save for the future instead of living paycheck to paycheck. That's very generous, sir. It's market rate for the position. Don't undersell yourself, Mr. Rowan. You're bringing skills and connections we desperately need. The food arrived, giving Nate a moment to process. Across the table, Elena was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Hope mixed with apprehension, like she was afraid he might still back out. "One more question," Nate said. "Why me? Really? You could hire someone with an MBA and corporate experience. Why a mechanic from a downtown garage?" Victor set down his fork, and for the first time, Nate saw something genuine in his expression. Not the CEO mask, not the protective father, but the actual person underneath. "Because my company has spent millions on community programs that don't work. We've hired consultants and analysts and people with impressive credentials who produce beautiful reports and 0 results. We're not connecting with the communities we're supposed to serve because we're sending people who've never actually lived in those communities." He paused, took a sip of wine. "You, Mr. Rowan, live it. You know what it's like to choose between fixing your car and paying rent. You understand the barriers our target demographic faces because you've faced them yourself. And more than that, you care. Not because it looks good on a resume, but because you genuinely want to help people." "David was like that," Elena said softly. "My husband. He worked in nonprofit development, and he used to say that the best programs were run by people who understood struggle, not people who studied it." The mention of her late husband created a moment of quiet at the table, an acknowledgement of the ghost that would always be part of Elena's story. "Your husband was right," Victor said, "and I didn't appreciate him enough when he was alive. I thought ambition and business acumen were what mattered. I was wrong. It was as close to an apology as Nate suspected Victor Caldwell ever got, and from Elena's surprised expression, she thought so too. So do we have a deal? Victor extended his hand across the table. Nate looked at Elena, who nodded slightly, permission and encouragement wrapped into one gesture. Then he reached out and shook Victor's hand. We have a deal. When do I start? 2 weeks? That gives you time to wrap up at your current job and for us to set up your office, introduce you to the team. 2 weeks works. They finished dinner discussing logistics, office location, team structure, initial priorities. Victor was all business now, outlining expectations and resources with the efficiency of someone who'd built an empire on clear communication and defined goals. But underneath the business talk, Nate sensed something else. An olive branch extended, an acceptance offered. Victor might not fully approve of his daughter dating a mechanic, but he was choosing to trust her judgment. That meant something. As they left the restaurant, Elena pulled Nate aside while Victor took a call near the valet stand. How are you feeling? She asked. Terrified, excited, like I just agreed to jump off a cliff and hope there's water below. There's water, I promise. Elena smiled. And for what it's worth, I think you're going to be amazing at this. Even if I have no idea what I'm doing? Especially then. The best leaders are the ones who know they don't have all the answers and aren't afraid to ask for help. Victor finished his call and returned, and they stood together on the sidewalk while the valet brought around their respective vehicles, Victor's town car, Elena's SUV, and Nate's beat-up Civic, which looked increasingly ridiculous next to the luxury vehicles. Mr. Rowan, Victor said, welcome to Caldwell Motors. I'll have my assistant contact you tomorrow with paperwork and details. Thank you, sir. I won't let you down. I know you won't, because if you do, my daughter will never forgive me for suggesting this. Victor's lips twitched in what might have been a smile. And that's significantly more terrifying than any business failure. Elena rolled her eyes, but she was smiling too. Good night, Dad. Victor left in his town car, and then it was just Nate and Elena standing in the warm evening air, the city moving around them. Want to get coffee? Elena asked. There's a place 2 blocks from here that stays open late. Don't you need to get back to Maya? She's with her nanny tonight. Sometimes I need time to just be Elena. Not Maya's mom or Victor's daughter. Just me. They walked to the coffee shop, a small place with mismatched furniture and local art on the walls. It was exactly Nate's kind of place, unpretentious and real, and he could tell from Elena's relaxed posture that she felt the same. They ordered black coffee for him, some complicated latte for her, and found a corner table away from the few other customers. So you're really doing this, Elena said. Joining Caldwell Motors, jumping into my world. Looks like it. Having second thoughts? About you? Never. About what this means, how complicated it's going to get? Constantly. Elena wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. People are already talking, Nate. Board members, business associates, society columnists. They want to know who you are, where you came from, what your intentions are. And what do you tell them? The truth. That you're someone who makes me happy. Someone who's kind to my daughter and stands up to my father and saves strangers from choking. Someone real. That's not going to satisfy them. I don't care about satisfying them. I spent 2 years trying to be what everyone else needed me to be. The perfect grieving widow, the dedicated daughter, the competent executive. I'm tired of performing, Nate. With you, I don't have to. Nate reached across the table, took her hand. Her fingers were warm from the coffee cup, and she laced them through his like it was the most natural thing in the world. Can I tell you something? He said. Something I probably shouldn't admit this early. Please do. I'm falling for you, not the Caldwell name or the money or any of that. Just you, the woman who sits in parks with her daughter, who eats ice cream with sprinkles, who looks at my shabby apartment like it's something special. I'm falling for you, and it terrifies me because we barely know each other, and this could all fall apart spectacularly. Elena's eyes shimmered with tears. I'm falling for you too, and you're right. It could fall apart, but it could also be wonderful, and I think it's worth finding out which. They sat there in the coffee shop for 2 more hours, talking about everything and nothing. Nate learned that Elena had wanted to be a teacher before her father pulled her into the family business, that she played piano but hadn't touched a keyboard in years, that her favorite movie was an obscure French film from the 70s that Nate had never heard of. Elena learned that Nate had once dreamed of opening his own garage that specialized in teaching others, that he was terrible at cooking but excellent at grilling, that his mother had raised him on classic rock and he still knew every word to every Led Zeppelin song. They were learning each other piece by piece, building something fragile and precious in a corner of a coffee shop while the city hummed around them. When they finally left, the street was quieter, the businesses mostly closed. They walked slowly back toward the restaurant where their cars waited, neither quite ready for the evening to end. "Tomorrow night," Elena said as they reached her SUV, "come to dinner, at the mansion. Maya keeps asking when she'll see you again, and I think you've earned the right to experience family dinner with the Caldwells." "Is that a reward or a punishment?" "Both, probably." Elena smiled. "But I'd really like you there." "Then I'll be there." She kissed him then, soft and brief, but real. The first kiss, the one that made everything official and terrifying and wonderful all at once. "Good night, Nate Rowan." "Good night, Elena Caldwell." He drove home in a daze, barely registering the traffic or the route. His phone rang as he was climbing the stairs to his apartment, his mother calling at nearly midnight because she had some sixth sense about important moments in his life. "Did you take the job?" she asked without preamble. "Yes." "And the girl?" "We're falling for each other, Ma. It's fast and probably crazy, but it's real." His mother was quiet for a long moment. "Your father would be proud, you know, if he'd stuck around to see the man you became." It was rare for her to mention his father, the man who'd left when Nate was 7 and never looked back. But when she did, it was always in moments like this, when Nate needed to hear that he was nothing like the man who'd abandoned them. "I'm scared," Nate admitted. "What if I'm not good enough for this job? What if I mess it up? What if—" "Nathan Emmanuel Rowan, you listen to me. You have spent your entire life being more than good enough. You are kind and hardworking and honest to a fault. You save people from choking. You teach car maintenance to single mothers. You visit your elderly neighbors to make sure they're okay. You are enough. You have always been enough. I love you, Ma. I love you too, baby. Now get some sleep. You've got a new life starting." Nate lay in bed that night, staring at his ceiling, thinking about how drastically his life had changed in just 4 days. Last Thursday, he'd been a mechanic with no prospects and a humiliating story about a blind date gone wrong. Now he had a job with Caldwell Motors, a relationship with Elena, and a future that looked completely different than anything he'd imagined. It was terrifying. It was wonderful. It was exactly what he hadn't known he needed. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of transition. Nate gave his notice at Martina's shop, trained his replacement, a young guy named Carlos who reminded Nate of himself at 18, and said goodbye to the garage that had been home for nearly a decade. His last day was bittersweet. The regular customers brought him cards and small gifts. Mrs. Chen cried and made him promise to visit, and Jimmy gave him an awkward hug and told him not to forget where he came from. "Like I could forget this place," Nate said, looking around the garage one last time. "Every good thing I learned about hard work and integrity, I learned here." "Yeah, well, don't get too fancy in your corporate office. You're still a grease monkey at heart. Always." During those 2 weeks, Nate also navigated the complicated waters of dating Elena Caldwell publicly. There were dinners at the mansion where Victor watched him with continued assessment, afternoons at the park with Maya, who decided Nate was now a permanent fixture in her life, and one memorable evening when photographers caught them leaving a movie theater and the photos ended up in a society column with speculation about the mystery man dating the Caldwell heir. Elena had warned him it would happen, but seeing his own face in a newspaper, poorly lit and looking uncomfortable, was surreal. "Welcome to my world," Elena had said when she'd called to apologize. "This is what I meant about complications. It's weird, but I'll survive it. The media will dig into your background, you know. They'll find out about your father leaving, your mother working 2 jobs, every embarrassing thing you've ever done. Then they'll find out I'm exactly who I said I was, a mechanic from a working-class family who got lucky enough to meet someone extraordinary." Elena had gone quiet on the other end of the phone, and when she spoke again, her voice was thick with emotion. "How are you so good at this?" "At what?" "At being okay with who you are. at not apologizing for your past or trying to be someone else. Because the alternative is exhausting, Nate said simply. I spent enough time in my 20s wishing I was someone different. It didn't change anything except make me miserable. His first day at Caldwell Motors arrived on a Monday that felt both monumental and ordinary. Nate wore the one suit he owned, purchased specifically for this occasion, and walked into the gleaming office building feeling like an imposter in business casual. Victor's assistant, an efficient woman named Margaret, met him in the lobby and gave him a tour that left his head spinning. The Caldwell Motors headquarters was massive. 15 floors of offices, design studios, testing facilities, and conference rooms. His office was on the 7th floor, modest but professional, with a window overlooking the city and a desk that was 3 times the size of his entire kitchen. Mr. Caldwell will meet with you at 10, Margaret said. Until then, I'll introduce you to your team. The team consisted of 4 people, 2 coordinators, a grant writer, and an administrative assistant. They looked at Nate with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism, clearly wondering what qualified a mechanic to run their department. Nate decided honesty was the best approach. I know what you're thinking, he said at their first meeting. Who is this guy, and why is he suddenly in charge? Fair question. The truth is, I have no corporate experience, no MBA, no fancy credentials. What I do have is 8 years of hands-on experience teaching automotive skills to people who need them most. I've run community workshops, volunteered with at-risk youth, and spent my career in the neighborhoods we're supposed to be serving. He paused, looking at each of them in turn. I'm not here to replace what you've been doing. I'm here to make it real, to turn programs into actual impact, to build relationships instead of just writing reports. And I need your help to do that because you know this organization and I don't. So, are you in? The silence lasted just long enough to make Nate nervous. Then Sarah, one of the coordinators, smiled. I'm in. I've been pushing for more hands-on programming for 2 years. Maybe you're the person who can actually make it happen. The others agreed, cautiously but genuinely, and Nate felt his first exhale of relief. Maybe this wouldn't be a complete disaster after all. His meeting with Victor at 10 was brief and professional. They discussed quarterly goals, budget allocations, and expectations. Victor was all business, treating Nate like any other employee, which was exactly what Nate had needed. As he was leaving, Victor called after him. Mr. Rowan? Sir? My daughter's having lunch delivered to your office today. Something about celebrating your first day. Victor's expression softened almost imperceptibly. She's happy. That matters to me more than you probably realize. It matters to me too, sir. I know it does. That's why you're here. Well, lunch arrived at noon, an elaborate spread from some Italian deli that was absolutely too much food for one person. The card read, "Proud of you, E and M." Nate smiled, took a photo, and sent it to Elena with a simple, "Thank you. This means everything." Her response came immediately, "You mean everything. Now go change the world." The first month at Caldwell Motors was a whirlwind of learning curves, strategic planning, and gradual team building. Nate spent his days in meetings and his evenings visiting community centers, making connections, listening to what people actually needed instead of assuming he knew. He also spent time with Elena and Maya, dinners at the mansion, afternoons at various parks. One memorable weekend when they took Maya to a children's museum and spent 3 hours building impossible architectural structures out of foam blocks. Victor watched it all with his characteristic assessment, but Nate noticed the older man softening in increments. One evening, Victor actually asked Nate's opinion on a community partnership proposal, listening seriously to his answer and implementing his suggestions. I think my father might actually like you, Elena whispered as they cleaned up after dinner one night, Maya already in bed. Like is a strong word. I think he tolerates me. For my father, that's the same thing. 3 months into his new position, Nate presented his first major initiative to the Caldwell Motors Board, a comprehensive community automotive training program partnering with 6 schools and 3 community centers. It would provide hands-on training, tool scholarships, and job placement assistance for graduates. He stood in that boardroom in his still new suit, facing 20 executives who'd probably forgotten more about business than he'd ever know, and pitched his vision with every ounce of passion he had. When he finished, the room was silent. Then Victor started clapping, and the rest of the board followed. The program was approved unanimously with full funding. Nate called his mother from the parking garage after the meeting, his hands still shaking with adrenaline. "I did it, Ma. They approved everything. Of course they did. I told you, you're enough. You've always been enough." That evening, Elena surprised him by showing up at his apartment, which she'd been doing more frequently, enjoying the normalcy of his small space compared to the mansion's formality. "I heard about the board meeting," she said, kissing him hello. "My father called. He said you were brilliant." He said adequate and surprisingly well prepared. "That's his version of brilliant, trust me." Elena kicked off her heels, designer shoes that probably cost more than his monthly rent, and curled up next to him on his second-hand couch. "I'm proud of you, you know. What you're building, what you're doing, it matters. I couldn't have done it without you believing I could. Yes, you could have. You just wouldn't have had the platform." She looked up at him, and there was something in her expression, vulnerability and hope mixed together. "Nate, I need to tell you something." His heart stuttered. "Okay." "Maya asked me today if you're going to be her new daddy." The words hung in the air between them, loaded with meaning and possibility and terror. "What did you tell her?" Nate's voice came out rougher than intended. "I told her that I didn't know, but that I hoped so. That you're someone special, someone who makes us both happy." Elena's hand found his. "I know it's fast, I know we're still figuring this out, but Nate, I'm falling in love with you, completely, and Maya already loves you, and I think, if you're ready, if you want this, we could be something real. Not just dating, but actually building a life together." Nate pulled her closer, breathing in the scent of her perfume, feeling the solid reality of her against him. "I love you," he said simply. "I love you, and I love Maya, and I want everything you're offering. It terrifies me, and I have no idea if I'm ready, but I want it anyway." Elena's smile was radiant. "Then let's figure it out together." They sat there in his modest apartment, planning a future that would have seemed impossible just months ago. A mechanic and a billionaire's daughter, choosing each other despite every reason it shouldn't work. But sometimes the best things were the ones that shouldn't work on paper, but did in reality. Sometimes love was simple, even when circumstances were complicated. Sometimes a prank became the beginning of everything that mattered. 6 months after that conversation in Nate's apartment, the Community Automotive Training Program launched with a ceremony that brought together everyone who'd made it possible. The event was held at Roosevelt Community Center, where Nate had been volunteering for years, and the gymnasium had been transformed with banners, equipment displays, and rows of chairs filled with students, parents, community leaders, and Caldwell Motors executives. Nate stood backstage, adjusting his tie for the third time, when Elena appeared beside him with Maya in tow. "You're nervous," Elena observed. "There are about 200 people out there, including your father, the mayor, and half the city's media. Why would I be nervous?" Maya tugged on his sleeve. "You'll do great, Nate. You always do great." He picked her up, marveling at how much she'd grown in the past months, how comfortable they'd become together. She called him Nate, not Dad. They'd decided that together, respecting David's memory while acknowledging the new reality they were building. But the love was there, uncomplicated and real. "Thanks, kiddo. You gonna watch from the front row?" "Duh. Mommy saved us the best seats." Elena smiled, straightened his tie one final time, and kissed him gently. "You've got this. Just be yourself." Margaret appeared, clipboard in hand. "Mr. Rowan, they're ready for you." Nate took a deep breath, set Maya down, and walked onto the stage. The applause was immediate and warm. He saw faces he recognized, former customers from Martinez's shop, volunteers from the fire department, students from his weekend workshops. And there, in the front row, sat Elena and Maya next to Victor Caldwell, who was actually smiling. "Good morning," Nate said into the microphone, his voice steadier than he felt. 6 months ago, I stood in a boardroom and pitched an idea that probably seemed crazy to a lot of people. A mechanic with no business degree proposing to overhaul how Caldwell Motors approaches community engagement. I'm sure some of you thought I'd fail. Scattered laughter from the audience. The truth is, I thought I might fail too. But then I remembered why I wanted to do this in the first place. I remembered Mrs. Chen, who couldn't afford to take her car to a shop and was driving with bad brakes because she didn't know any better. I remembered the single mothers in my weekend workshops who cried when they learned they'd been overcharged hundreds of dollars for simple repairs. I remembered every person who felt powerless because they didn't have access to basic knowledge that could change their lives. He paused, looking out at the crowd. This program isn't about charity, it's about empowerment. It's about giving people the tools and knowledge to take control of one aspect of their lives. Because when you can fix your own car, when you understand what's under the hood, when you can't be taken advantage of by unscrupulous mechanics, that's freedom. That's dignity. The applause built, and Nate felt his confidence grow. Today, we're launching partnerships with 6 schools and 3 community centers. We're providing scholarships for tools and supplies. We're connecting graduates with job placement programs at local garages and shops. But most importantly, we're building relationships, real, sustained connections with communities that have been overlooked for too long. He gestured to the equipment displays around the room. None of this would exist without the support of Caldwell Motors, the vision of Victor Caldwell, and the dedication of my incredible team. But it also wouldn't exist without the communities themselves, the people who told us what they needed instead of what we thought they needed. Maya's voice suddenly cut through the gymnasium. "That's my Nate!" The entire audience turned to look at the 5-year-old standing on her chair, pointing proudly at the stage. Elena tried to pull her down, mortified, but the crowd erupted in laughter and louder applause. Nate grinned, feeling the tension break. And that's Maya, who reminds me daily why this work matters. Because we're not just teaching automotive skills, we're showing kids like her that people from different worlds can come together, that opportunities exist for everyone, that kindness and knowledge can change everything. He wrapped up his speech with practical details about enrollment and program logistics, then introduced the mayor, who gave a mercifully brief speech about public-private partnerships. Victor spoke next, surprising everyone by praising Nate's leadership and dedication in terms that were almost effusive by his standards. After the ceremony, the crowd mingled while students and their families toured the equipment and met the instructors. Nate found himself surrounded by people wanting to thank him, ask questions, or share their own stories of struggle with car repairs and predatory mechanics. His mother appeared through the crowd, her eyes bright with tears. She'd taken the day off from both her jobs to be here, wearing the dress Nate had bought her for Christmas. "Nathan," she whispered, pulling him into a fierce hug. "I am so proud of you. Your whole life, this is what you've been building toward. Helping people. Making a difference. I learned from the best, Ma." She pulled back, cupped his face in her hands. "Your father would be—" She stopped, reconsidered. "No, your father doesn't deserve any credit for the man you became. This is all you, baby. All your heart and hard work." Victor Caldwell appeared beside them, and Nate saw his mother straighten slightly, intimidated by the billionaire CEO despite herself. "Mrs. Rowan," Victor said, extending his hand, "it's a pleasure to finally meet you. Your son speaks of you often." "Mr. Caldwell, thank you for this opportunity, for believing in Nathan. I should thank you for raising someone with his integrity and passion. Those qualities can't be taught in business school." Victor glanced at Nate. "You should know, the board voted this morning to expand the program to 10 additional locations next year. Full funding approved." Nate's mind went blank. 10 locations? Your pilot program is already exceeding every metric we established. Applications are up 300%, community engagement is through the roof, and you've managed to do it all under budget. That's the kind of success we want to replicate. I don't know what to say. Say you'll keep doing what you're doing, and maybe hire a few more people to help you do it. Victor moved on to talk with other guests, leaving Nate standing with his mother in stunned silence. 10 locations, his mother repeated. "Nathan, do you understand what this means? You're changing lives on a scale most people only dream about." "It doesn't feel real yet." Elena appeared with Maya, who was clutching a balloon someone had given her. "There you are. Nate, there are reporters outside who want interviews, and several community leaders want to discuss partnerships. You're officially in demand. Can I have 5 minutes first?" "Of course." Nate excused himself, walking through the gymnasium and out a side door into the afternoon sunlight. He needed a moment to process, to breathe, to let the magnitude of what was happening settle into something he could comprehend. He found himself in the small courtyard behind the community center, where he'd spent countless Saturday mornings teaching oil changes and brake pad replacements. The space was familiar and grounding, and he sat on the concrete step, letting his head fall into his hands. Overwhelming? Nate looked up to find Victor standing a few feet away, hands in his pockets, looking more relaxed than Nate had ever seen him. A little bit, yeah. Victor sat beside him on the step, and for a moment they just sat in silence, a mechanic and a billionaire CEO, watching birds fight over a discarded sandwich in the parking lot. "Can I tell you something?" Victor said finally. "When Elena first told me about you, I did exactly what you'd expect. I had you investigated. Background check, financial records, interviews with people who knew you. I was looking for the angle, the reason a mechanic would be interested in my daughter." Nate's stomach tightened, but he didn't interrupt. "You know what I found? Parking tickets, mostly. A few late rent payments, medical bills from when your mother broke her ankle and you took on extra shifts to cover her costs. Zero criminal record, zero debts beyond the ordinary, zero indication you'd ever done anything remotely questionable." Victor smiled slightly. "It was deeply disappointing from an investigative standpoint. You're exactly who you appeared to be, aggressively normal and decent. Is there a point to this story? The point is that I spent 2 years after David died trying to protect Elena and Maya from getting hurt again. I controlled everything I could control, made every decision I thought would keep them safe, and all I did was make my daughter miserable and isolated." Victor turned to look at Nate directly. "You did what I couldn't. You gave her back her life. You showed up with no agenda except genuine care, and you reminded her what it feels like to be seen as a person instead of a Caldwell. That's not something I can quantify or put in a quarterly report, but it's the most valuable thing anyone has done for my family in years. Sir, Let me finish. I'm not good at this, and I'm only going to say it once." Victor's voice was rough with emotion. "Thank you for loving my daughter and granddaughter. Thank you for being someone I can trust with the people who matter most to me. And thank you for proving that I was wrong about what kind of person deserves to be part of this family." Nate felt his throat tighten. "That means more than you know." "I imagine it does. Now, there's one more thing." Victor pulled a small box from his pocket, and Nate's heart stopped. "This was my wife's engagement ring. She died when Elena was 12, and I've been holding on to it, waiting for the right person to give it to." He pressed the box into Nate's hand. "I think you're that person. If Elena says yes, and I believe she will, I want her to have her mother's ring. Not because of tradition or legacy, but because her mother was the only person who ever saw past my defenses the way Elena sees past yours. You understand each other in a way that's rare. Don't let it go." Nate opened the box with shaking hands. The ring was beautiful, simple and elegant, a single diamond on a platinum band, not ostentatious despite the Caldwell wealth, just perfect. "Sir, I don't know if I'm ready." "Nobody's ever ready, but you love her, and she loves you, and Maya thinks you hung the moon. That's as ready as anyone gets." Victor stood, brushed off his expensive pants. "The reporters can wait another 10 minutes. Take the time you need." He walked back inside, leaving Nate alone with a ring box and a future that suddenly felt very real and very imminent. Nate sat there for a long moment, staring at the ring, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. A cruel prank that turned into a blind date that wasn't. A little girl who'd said, "I like him," and changed the trajectory of his entire life. A woman who'd seen past his oil-stained sleeves to the person underneath. 6 months ago, he'd been a mechanic with no prospects. Now he was director of community engagement, dating a billionaire's daughter, and holding an engagement ring that represented acceptance into a family he'd never imagined being part of. His phone buzzed. "Elena. You okay out there?" He typed back, "More than okay. Come find me." She appeared 2 minutes later, slipping through the door into the courtyard, and Nate's breath caught the way it always did when he saw her. Even in simple clothes, even without trying, she was the most beautiful thing in his world. "Everything all right?" she asked, sitting beside him. "Your father just gave me your mother's engagement ring." Elena's eyes went wide. "He what?" Nate showed her the box, watched her expression transform from shock to tears to something that looked like joy and grief mixed together. I never thought he'd give this to anyone, she whispered, touching the ring gently. He's kept it locked away for 20 years. He said, I'm the right person, that you and I understand each other the way he and your mother did. We do. Elena looked at him, tears streaming down her face. Nate, we absolutely do. I'm not proposing right now, Nate said quickly. This isn't the moment. You're crying. There are 200 people inside. Maya's running around with a balloon. But Elena, I want to, soon. I want to ask you to marry me, to be Maya's stepfather, to build a life together that's messy and complicated and wonderful. Yes. I didn't ask yet. I'm saying yes anyway. Now, later, whenever you officially ask, yes. 1,000 times, yes. Elena laughed through her tears. I don't need a perfect moment or a grand gesture. I just need you choosing us every single day. Nate kissed her then, gentle and sure, tasting salt from her tears and feeling the certainty settle into his bones. This was right. All of it. The job, the family, the future they were building together. When they finally pulled apart, Elena rested her forehead against his. Can we tell Maya? Not yet. Let me do this properly. Plan something, ask her permission first, then ask you officially. She's going to lose her mind with excitement. I'm counting on it. They sat together in the courtyard for a few more minutes, holding hands, making quiet plans, until Maya's voice echoed from inside. Where are they? I want to show Nate my balloon. That's our cue, Elena said, standing and pulling Nate up with her. They walked back inside together, and Nate slipped the ring box into his pocket, feeling its weight like a promise. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of interviews, handshakes, and celebration. The local news covered the program launch, and Nate found himself explaining his vision to reporters who seemed genuinely interested in the human story behind the corporate initiative. By evening, when the crowd finally dispersed and the cleanup was complete, Nate was exhausted but energized. His team was already planning the next phase, the applications were pouring in, and the future looked brighter than he'd ever imagined possible. 2 weeks later, on a Saturday morning, Nate took Maya to the park, just the two of them, while Elena attended a board meeting she couldn't miss. They went to their usual playground, the one where Maya had first pointed at him and said, I like him, and Nate pushed her on the swings while gathering his courage. Maya, can I talk to you about something important? Sure. She dragged her feet to stop the swing. What is it? Nate knelt down so they were eye level. You know how I've been spending a lot of time with you and your mom? Yeah, you're at our house like every day now. Right, and you know how much I care about both of you? Maya's eyes narrowed suspiciously. Are you going away? Because Sophie's uncle went away and now she only sees him on holidays and she's really sad about it. No, the opposite actually. Nate took a deep breath. I want to ask your mom to marry me. That means I'd be around all the time, officially part of your family. But I need to know if that's okay with you first. Maya was silent for a long moment, her expression serious in the way only children could be when processing big information. Would you be my new daddy? I'd be your stepdad. Your real dad was David, and he loved you very much. Nothing will ever change that. But I'd be someone else who loves you and helps take care of you and is there for all the important stuff. Like birthday parties and school plays? Exactly like that. And you'd live with us? In the big house? If your mom says yes, then yeah, we'd all live together. Maya considered this, swinging her legs back and forth. Would you still teach me about cars? Absolutely, that's non-negotiable. And would you still make funny faces when you think broccoli is gross? Nate laughed. I can't promise I'll ever like broccoli, so yes. Okay then, you can marry Mommy. Maya threw her arms around his neck. But you have to promise you won't leave like my first daddy did, even though he didn't mean to. Nate held her tight, feeling the weight of that promise. I promise, kiddo. I'm not going anywhere. You're stuck with me. Good. Can we get ice cream now? Sure. But Maya? Don't tell your mom yet, okay? I want to surprise her. Maya nodded solemnly. I'm very good at keeping secrets. Sophie told me she likes Jason in our class, and I didn't tell anyone except my stuffed elephant, and he can't talk, so it doesn't count. Perfect. You're the best secret keeper I know. They got ice cream, rainbow with sprinkles for Maya, chocolate for Nate. And when they returned to the mansion later, Maya ran to her room without giving anything away. Nate found Elena in her office, surrounded by paperwork, looking tired but beautiful. "How was the board meeting?" he asked. "Long, tedious, full of men who loved the sound of their own voices." She stood, stretching. "How was the park?" "Good, important, actually." "Oh?" Nate closed the office door, suddenly nervous despite having planned this moment for days. "Elena Caldwell, I need to ask you something." She turned to face him fully, and he saw the moment she understood, her eyes going wide, one hand coming up to cover her mouth. "I'm not rich," Nate said, pulling the ring box from his pocket. "I can't offer you fancy vacations or designer clothes or any of the things you're used to. What I can offer is showing up every single day, loving you and Maya with everything I have, building a life that's real and messy, and ours." He opened the box, revealing her mother's ring. "Your father gave me this because he thinks I'm worthy of his family, but the only opinion that matters is yours. Elena, will you marry me? Will you let me be Maya's stepdad, your husband, and the luckiest man alive?" Elena was crying again, nodding before she could even speak. "Yes, yes, absolutely yes." Nate slipped the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit, like it had been waiting for her all along, and kissed her while she laughed and cried simultaneously. "I asked Maya first," he said when they pulled apart. "Got her permission. She said yes, but only if I promised to keep making faces at broccoli." "That sounds like her." Elena looked at the ring on her finger, turning her hand to catch the light. "My mother's ring. I can't believe my father gave this to you. He said we understand each other the way he and your mother did." "We do. God, Nate, we really do." Maya burst through the door at that moment, unable to contain herself any longer. "Did you ask her? Did she say yes? Can I tell Grandpa now?" "You knew?" Elena laughed, scooping her daughter up. "You little sneak! Nate made me promise not to tell. It was so hard." "You did great, kiddo," Nate said. "Best secret keeper ever." "So we're a family now? Like, official?" Elena and Nate exchanged a look, and he saw his own hope and joy reflected back at him. "Yeah, Maya," Elena said softly. "We're officially a family now." They told Victor that evening over dinner, and his reaction was exactly what Nate had come to expect, controlled emotion expressed through practical statements. "About time," Victor said, shaking Nate's hand. "I was beginning to think you'd never get around to it. Margaret has been placing bets in the office pool. She'll be pleased she won." "There's an office pool about my engagement. There's an office pool about everything. That's what happens when you date the boss's daughter publicly." Victor turned to Elena. "Your mother would be happy. She always said I'd approve of your choice when I finally stopped being an idiot about class and money." "She was right," Elena said, kissing her father's cheek. "About everything." The engagement was announced 2 weeks later, and the response was exactly what Nate had feared and expected. Society columnists had opinions about the mechanic marrying into the Caldwell fortune. Think pieces appeared about class dynamics in modern fairy tales. Photographers camped outside Nate's apartment building until he officially moved into the mansion, making his studio space redundant. But through it all, Nate kept showing up, to work, to dinner with Elena and Maya, to volunteer shifts at the community center. He refused to become someone else just because his circumstances had changed. He was still the guy who saved Mrs. Chen money on repairs, who taught weekend workshops, who made faces at broccoli. The wedding was planned for spring, 6 months after the engagement, in the garden of the Caldwell mansion. Elena wanted something intimate, just family and close friends, nothing ostentatious. Nate would have married her at City Hall, but he understood that some traditions mattered, especially to Victor, who was giving away his only daughter. In the weeks leading up to the wedding, Nate's community program continued expanding. The 10 additional locations opened, enrollment tripled, and the first group of students graduated with job offers already secured. Local news ran a feature about the program's success, interviewing graduates who spoke about how learning automotive skills had changed their lives, given them confidence and opportunities they'd never had before. Nate watched the segment from his office, surrounded by his team, and felt the satisfaction of work that truly mattered. "You did this, Sarah said, pointing at the screen. All of this happened because you believed it could. We did this, Nate corrected. Every single person in this room made this possible. But he knew what she meant. Sometimes one person's vision and persistence could create ripples that touched hundreds of lives. He'd learned that from his mother, from the community organizers who'd inspired his volunteer work, and now he was passing it forward. The night before the wedding, Nate's mother stayed at the mansion, Victor's invitation offered with his characteristic gruff kindness. She'd never seen anything like the house, had walked through it with wide eyes and quiet amazement. Nathan, I can't believe this is going to be your home, she said as they sat in the garden together, the space already decorated for tomorrow's ceremony. I still don't believe it sometimes. I wake up and think I'm going to be back in my studio apartment, that all of this was some elaborate dream. But it's real. But it's real, he agreed. Ma, I need to thank you for everything, for raising me to believe kindness matters, for showing me what hard work looks like, for never making me feel like we were less than anyone else just because we had less money. His mother's eyes filled with tears. You were always enough, baby. Always. I just wish your father had stuck around long enough to see the man you became. His loss. I had you, and that was more than enough. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the manicured gardens, and Nate thought about how far he'd come from that humiliating Friday night 6 months ago. The cruel prank that had sent him to a restaurant alone had somehow led to this: a family, a career that mattered, a future that looked nothing like what he'd imagined, but everything he'd needed. The wedding day arrived with perfect spring weather, clear skies, gentle breeze, everything conspiring to create the ideal setting. Nate stood at the altar in a suit that actually fit, his mother in the front row dabbing at her eyes, Victor beside her looking proud and emotional in equal measure. Then the music started, and Maya appeared first, walking down the aisle in a purple dress that she'd insisted on because purple is the best color and everyone should know it. She took her role as flower girl very seriously, distributing petals with the precision of someone performing surgery. And then Elena appeared, and Nate forgot how to breathe. She wore a simple white dress, her hair loose around her shoulders, carrying wildflowers instead of an elaborate bouquet. She looked like herself, not a Caldwell heir, not a billionaire's daughter, just Elena, the woman who'd sat with a stranger in a restaurant and changed his entire life. Victor walked her down the aisle, and when he placed Elena's hand in Nate's, he whispered, "Take care of my girls." "With everything I have," Nate promised. The ceremony was brief and perfect. They'd written their own vows, and when it was Nate's turn to speak, he looked at Elena and said simply, 6 months ago, I was supposed to be the victim of a joke. Instead, I found my purpose. You and Maya showed me that family isn't about money or status or where you come from. It's about showing up, about choosing each other every day, about building something real together. I promise to keep showing up, every single day for the rest of our lives. Elena was crying, but she smiled through the tears. You saved a man from choking the night we met. But what I didn't know then was that you were going to save me too, from isolation, from going through the motions, from forgetting what it feels like to be truly seen. You gave me back my life, Nate Rowan, and I promise to spend the rest of mine making sure you know how extraordinary you are. Maya, standing beside them as junior bridesmaid, whispered loudly, "Can you kiss now? I want cake." The guests erupted in laughter, and the officiant smiled. "I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." And Nate did, holding Elena close while their friends and family applauded, and Maya tugged on his sleeve asking about cake. The reception was everything a wedding should be: joy and laughter, terrible dancing, and heartfelt toasts. Victor gave a speech that made everyone cry, talking about second chances and unexpected blessings. Nate's mother spoke about watching her son grow into someone who changed lives for a living. And Maya got up unprompted and announced that Nate made the best funny faces, and she was glad he was officially her stepdad now. As the evening wound down and guests began leaving, Nate found himself standing with Elena and Maya near the garden fountain, watching the last of the sunset. "So this is our life now," Elena said, leaning against him. "Official and documented and everything." "Apparently so. How do you feel about it?" "Ask me tomorrow when the wedding adrenaline wears off and reality sets in." "Fair enough." Maya yawned widely. "Can Nate carry me to bed? My feet hurt from dancing." "Of course, kiddo." Nate scooped her up and she rested her head on his shoulder with the complete trust of someone who knew she was safe and loved. They walked back to the mansion together, husband, wife, and daughter, past wedding decorations and into a future that would have seemed impossible just months ago. The house staff had left out champagne and chocolate-covered strawberries in the master bedroom, a wedding night gesture that was sweet but unnecessary. Nate and Elena sat on the balcony instead, still in their wedding clothes, watching the city lights and processing the magnitude of the day. "Do you ever think about how different things would be if I hadn't sat down at your table that night?" Elena asked. "All the time. I'd probably still be at Martinez's shop, eating ramen for dinner, volunteering on weekends, and wondering if my life would ever be more than that. You were already enough before you met me. Maybe, but you made me believe it." Nate pulled her closer. "And you gave me a family. That's something I'd stopped thinking I'd ever have." "We gave each other family," Elena corrected. "Maya and I were just going through motions before you. You reminded us what living actually feels like." They sat in comfortable silence, and Nate thought about the journey that had brought them here, a prank that backfired spectacularly. A little girl who'd pointed at a stranger and said, "I like him." It was so wise. A woman brave enough to trust someone new, a CEO who'd learned to let go of control, and a mechanic who'd discovered that sometimes the best things in life came disguised as disasters. 6 months from that humiliating blind date to this, married to Elena, stepfather to Maya, director of a program that was changing lives, accepted into a family he'd never imagined being part of. "What are you thinking about?" Elena asked. "That I need to send Derek a thank you card." "Derek? The guy who set you up as a joke?" "Yep. His cruel prank gave me everything that matters. That's worth acknowledging, even if he's still an idiot." Elena laughed, the sound carrying across the garden below. "Only you would think to thank the person who tried to humiliate you. I contain multitudes. You really do." The next morning, Nate woke up in the mansion's master bedroom, his bedroom now, officially, with Elena beside him and the knowledge that Maya was just down the hall. He lay there for a moment, taking it all in, waiting for the panic or imposter syndrome to kick in. But all he felt was peace, rightness, the sense that he was exactly where he belonged. His phone buzzed on the nightstand, a text from his mother. "Good morning, my married son. I'm so proud of you I could burst. Love you forever, Ma." He smiled, texted back a heart, and got up to start his first day as a married man. Downstairs, he found Maya already awake, eating cereal at the kitchen island while the house staff prepared breakfast. "Morning, kiddo." "Morning, Nate. You're my stepdad now." "I am indeed." "Does that mean I can call you Dad?" The question stopped him cold. They'd discussed this before, agreed that she'd call him Nate to honor David's memory. But here she was, asking permission to change that arrangement, and Nate felt his throat tighten. "Only if you want to," he said carefully. "I'll answer to whatever feels right to you." Maya considered this seriously. "I think maybe both? Nate, when we're just hanging out, and Dad, when it's important stuff? Like when you come to my school plays, or teach me about cars, or when I need help with something big. I think that's perfect. Very sophisticated solution." "I'm very sophisticated. Grandpa says so." Elena appeared then, still in her pajamas, hair messy from sleep, looking more beautiful than she had at the wedding. "Morning, family," she said, kissing Maya's head, then Nate's cheek. "What did I miss?" "Maya and I just negotiated naming conventions." "Sounds official." "It was very official," Maya confirmed. "I used big words and everything." They ate breakfast together, the first of countless breakfasts they'd share as a family, and Nate marveled at how normal it felt. Yes, they were eating in a mansion with staff preparing food and a security detail outside, but they were also just a family starting their day, talking about nothing important, existing in the comfortable rhythm of people who'd chosen each other. Over the following months, life settled into a pattern that was both extraordinary and wonderfully ordinary. Nate continued expanding his community program, now coordinating with 15 locations across the city. Elena gradually reduced her role at Caldwell Motors, focusing instead on nonprofit work that she found more fulfilling. And Maya thrived in school, telling everyone who'd listen about her stepdad who taught her about engines and made her mom laugh again. Victor remained a constant presence, less controlling than he'd been, but still protective in his own way. He and Nate had developed an unlikely friendship built on mutual respect and shared love for Elena and Maya. They met for lunch monthly, ostensibly to discuss business, but really just to talk. Two men from completely different worlds finding common ground in family. One evening, nearly a year after the wedding, Nate found himself back at Roosevelt Community Center for a graduation ceremony. 30 students were completing the automotive program, each one representing a life changed, an opportunity created, a future made possible. As he handed out certificates and shook hands, Nate recognized several faces from his old weekend workshops, people who'd taken that first step toward learning and had transformed it into careers. After the ceremony, a young woman approached him, maybe 19, with a certificate in hand and tears in her eyes. "Mr. Rowan, I just wanted to thank you. I was working 3 part-time jobs before this program, barely making rent, no idea how to get ahead. Now I have a full-time position at Morrison's Auto, health insurance, and I'm saving for community college. This changed my life." Nate felt his own eyes sting. "You changed your life. I just provided the tools." "You provided hope," she corrected. "You made me believe someone like me could do this." After she walked away, Elena appeared beside him. She'd been in the audience with Maya, who was now talking excitedly with the other kids present. "That never gets old, does it?" Elena said, watching the graduates celebrate. "Knowing you made a real difference." "No, never." Nate pulled her close. "Thank you for making this possible, for believing I could do it. You were always going to do something like this. I just happened to be there when the opportunity presented itself. You were always going to save me from that restaurant. I just happened to look pathetic enough for a 5-year-old to take pity on me." Elena laughed. "Maya claims full credit for our relationship, you know. She tells everyone at school that she found you first. She's not wrong." They watched Maya across the room, animated and happy, showing another kid her latest drawing of what she claimed was a very accurate depiction of a car engine. "We should probably tell her," Elena said quietly. "Tell her what?" "That she's going to be a big sister." Nate froze. "What?" Elena smiled, nervous and excited. "I found out this morning I'm pregnant, about 6 weeks along." The gymnasium seemed to tilt, then steady. Nate pulled Elena into a hug that was probably too tight, but he couldn't help it. "We're having a baby?" "We're having a baby." "When were you going to tell me?" "Right now, apparently. I was going to wait until tonight, do something romantic, but then I saw you with those graduates and I couldn't keep it in anymore." Nate laughed, overwhelmed with joy. "Maya's going to lose her mind. Completely. Should we tell her now or wait?" "Now. Definitely now. I can't keep this secret for 5 minutes, let alone days." They called Maya over and Nate knelt down so he was eye level with her. "Hey kiddo, we have some news." "What kind of news? Good news or eat your vegetables news?" "Good news. Very good news." Nate glanced at Elena, who nodded encouragement. "You're going to be a big sister. Your mom and I are having a baby." Maya's eyes went so wide they looked like they might fall out of her head. "A baby? Like a real actual baby?" "A real actual baby." "Ah!" Maya's shriek of excitement echoed through the gymnasium, causing everyone to turn and stare. She launched herself at both of them, and they caught her in a group hug while she bounced with uncontainable joy. "Can I name it? Can I teach it about cars? Will it sleep in my room? Can we get a puppy too, since we're already getting a baby?" "One thing at a time," Elena said, laughing through happy tears. "But yes, you can definitely help teach them about cars. This is the best day ever. Better than ice cream day at school. Better than the zoo. Better than everything." They stood there in the middle of the community center, a family of 3 about to become 4, while graduates celebrated around them and the future stretched out bright and full of possibility. That night, after Maya had finally exhausted herself talking about baby names and fallen asleep, Nate and Elena sat in their bedroom processing the news. "I'm terrified," Nate admitted. "I barely know how to be a stepdad. Now I'm going to be an actual dad?" "You're already an actual dad. You've been Maya's dad in every way that matters since we got married. But this is different. This baby will be biologically mine. I'll be responsible from day one. And you'll be amazing at it, just like you're amazing with Maya. Elena took his hand, placed it on her still flat stomach. This baby is so lucky to have you as a father. They'll grow up knowing kindness and hard work and how to fix things, not just cars, but problems, relationships, the things that matter. I hope so. I know so. I know. They told Victor the next morning over breakfast, and his reaction was characteristically restrained, followed by quietly emotional. Another grandchild, he said, and there was wonder in his voice. I never thought I'd have even one, after everything with Elena and David. And now I'll have two. You okay, Dad? Elena asked. More than okay. I'm grateful. For all of this. For you, for Nate, for Maya, for this new baby. For second chances I didn't know I needed. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, and Nate threw himself into preparing, reading every book on parenting he could find, baby-proofing their bedroom, attending every doctor's appointment with Elena. Maya appointed herself the baby's official big sister and protector, talking to Elena's growing belly and making elaborate plans for all the things she'd teach her new sibling. 5 months into the pregnancy, they found out they were having a boy. Maya was ecstatic. She'd already decided on the name Daniel after her favorite character in a book series she loved. Daniel David Rowan, Elena said, testing the name. After your brother in spirit and David in memory. It's perfect, Nate agreed. Daniel David Rowan entered the world on a snowy January morning, arriving 3 days before his due date with a cry that suggested he had opinions and wasn't afraid to share them. Nate held his son for the first time and understood with sudden clarity what his mother had meant all those years, that love could be instant and complete and overwhelming. Maya met her baby brother that afternoon, approaching the hospital bed with unusual shyness. He's so small, she whispered. Was I that small? Smaller, actually, Elena said. Want to hold him? They positioned Maya carefully, and she held Daniel with the serious concentration of someone who understood the weight of responsibility. Hi, Daniel. I'm your big sister Maya. I'm going to teach you everything important, like how not to eat vegetables you don't like, and how engines work, and how Dad, is the best dad even though he's not perfect at anything. Hey, Nate protested, but he was smiling. It's true. You're terrible at cooking, and you always lose your keys, but you're really good at the important stuff, so it's okay. Thank you for that ringing endorsement. Victor arrived an hour later bringing flowers and a teddy bear that was larger than the baby. He held his new grandson with the careful tenderness of someone who'd forgotten what it felt like to hold something so small and fragile. He looks like you, Nate, Victor said. Same expression, like he's trying to figure out if the world makes sense yet. Does it make sense? Not even a little bit, but that's what makes it interesting. They brought Daniel home 3 days later, and life transformed in the way it does with newborns. Sleepless nights, constant feeding, the particular chaos that comes with adding a tiny human to an established household. But through it all, Nate felt grateful. For Elena, for Maya, for Daniel, for Victor, for his mother, who visited constantly and was in her element as a grandmother, for all of it. One night, when Daniel was 6 weeks old and finally sleeping for more than 2 hours at a stretch, Nate sat in the nursery rocking chair with his son in his arms. The house was quiet, everyone else asleep, and he let himself think about the journey that had led here. 18 months ago, he'd walked into Marcello's for a blind date that wasn't real. He'd been humiliated, alone, convinced he'd always be just a mechanic eating ramen and wondering if his life would ever amount to more. Now he was married to Elena Caldwell, stepfather to Maya, father to Daniel, director of a program that had changed hundreds of lives, son-in-law to Victor, who'd become more like an actual father than his biological one had ever been. All because a little girl had pointed at a stranger and said, "I like him." All because Elena had chosen to sit down instead of walk away. All because Nate had shown up every single day and tried his best to be worthy of the opportunities he'd been given. Daniel stirred in his arms, making the small noises newborns make, and Nate whispered, "I'm going to teach you everything I know, little man, about engines and kindness and showing up for people, about how love isn't conditional on money or status or being perfect, about how sometimes the best things in life start with disasters that turn into blessings. That's beautiful, Elena said from the doorway. She'd appeared silently, watching him with their son. How long have you been standing there? Long enough to remember why I fell in love with you. She came into the room, wrapped her arms around both of them. You know what Maya asked me tonight before bed? What? She asked if we could go back to that restaurant where we met. She wants to thank the waiter for seating us together because she says he's responsible for our family. Nate laughed quietly, careful not to wake Daniel. That's very Maya logic. It's not entirely wrong, though. If that waiter had seated us somewhere else, if he'd told me there were no available tables, if any number of small things had been different, we might never have had this. But we did have it. We do have it. We do. They stood there together in the soft lamplight of the nursery, a family built from chance and choice in equal measure, and Nate felt something settle deep in his chest. Not contentment exactly, life was too chaotic for that, with a 6-week-old and a 7-year-old and demanding careers, but something close to it. Satisfaction, maybe. The knowledge that he'd found his place in the world, his purpose, his people. Thank you, he whispered to Elena, for taking a chance on me. Thank you for being someone worth taking a chance on. Daniel woke up then, deciding it was time to eat, and the quiet moment dissolved into the practical reality of midnight feedings and diaper changes and the beautiful chaos of family life. But that was okay. Nate had learned that the best moments weren't always the quiet, perfect ones. Sometimes they were the messy, chaotic, middle-of-the-night ones where you were exhausted and overwhelmed, but also completely, genuinely happy. 2 years after that night in the nursery, Nate stood on a stage at the Civic Center accepting an award for community service. His program had expanded to 30 locations across 3 cities, had graduated over 2,000 students, and had been written about in national publications as a model for corporate community engagement. Elena and Maya sat in the front row, and Elena held 3-year-old Daniel on her lap while he waved enthusiastically every time he saw his father on stage. In his acceptance speech, Nate told the truth. This award represents the work of hundreds of people, instructors, volunteers, community leaders, students who believed they could change their lives. I'm just the person who got lucky enough to coordinate their efforts. He paused, looked directly at his family. But I want to dedicate this to 3 people specifically. To my wife, Elena, who taught me that love means supporting someone's dreams even when they're scary. To my daughter, Maya, who looked at a stranger in a restaurant and saw someone worth keeping. And to my son, Daniel, who reminds me every day why this work matters. Because we're building a future for kids like him, a world where opportunity isn't determined by where you start, but by how hard you're willing to work and how many people believe in you. The applause was thunderous, and after the ceremony, as they walked to the car through the late evening air, Maya grabbed Nate's hand. Dad, can I tell you something? Always, kiddo. I knew you were special that first night. When I saw you sitting alone looking sad, I knew you were someone important. I just didn't know you'd be important to us specifically. Nate knelt down, even though she was getting too old for that, and looked at his daughter, 7 years old now, gap-toothed and brilliant, and still convinced she could solve any problem with sufficient application of logic. You saved me that night, Maya. You know that, right? I was having the worst day of my life, and you pointed at me and changed everything. I know. I'm very good at fixing things, just like you. You absolutely are. They drove home through the city, his city now, the place where he'd built a life that mattered. And Nate thought about the mechanics of fortune, how small choices created large consequences, how one moment of cruelty from office workers who thought they were funny had led to this, a family, a purpose, a life that felt full and meaningful and real. That night, after the kids were in bed and he and Elena were finally alone, they sat on their bedroom balcony watching the city lights. Do you ever miss it? Elena asked. Your old life when things were simpler? Never. That life was simple because it was small. This life is complicated because it's big, full of people and purpose and meaning. I'll take complicated over simple any day. Even when Daniel won't sleep and Maya has homework drama and Victor is being difficult and work is overwhelming? Especially then. Because that means I have a family, Elena. That means I matter to people, and people matter to me. Do Do you know how long I went thinking I'd always be alone, that I'd missed my chance at this kind of life? I know exactly how that feels, Elena said quietly. After David died, I thought I was done. One great love, one terrible loss, and then just existing for Maya's sake. I never expected to feel this way again. But you do? But I do. Completely and terribly and wonderfully. They sat in comfortable silence, and somewhere in the house, Daniel cried out in his sleep. Nate stood automatically, ready to go check on him, but Elena pulled him back down. He's okay, just dreaming. Give him a minute. Sure enough, the crying stopped, and peace returned. We did good, Nate said, with this life we built. We did better than good. We did extraordinary. From a blind date that wasn't real. From a little girl who said, I like him. From you choosing to sit down instead of walking away. From you showing up, Elena finished, every single day since then, showing up and being exactly who you are. Daniel cried again, more insistent this time, and they both stood to go check on him. As they walked down the hallway together, husband and wife, partners in every sense, Nate felt the weight of gratitude settle around him like a blanket. They'd built something real from the wreckage of a cruel prank. They'd created family from unlikely circumstances. They'd proven that love didn't require perfect conditions or ideal timing or similar backgrounds. Sometimes love just required showing up, being honest, and choosing each other every single day. The rest was just details. And as Nate picked up his crying son and felt Elena's hand on his shoulder and heard Maya call out from her room asking if everyone was okay, he knew with absolute certainty that he'd gotten the details exactly right.